Ladies and gentlemen, the mayor has called the workshop to order. Mayor Davey.
I am here.
Councilmember Kaplan.
Here.
Councilmember Laredo.
Here.
Vice Mayor London.
Here.
Councilmember McCormick.
Here.
Councilmember Moss. Councilmember Segurola.
Here.
Oh, thank you.
Here.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
The first item, Mr. Mayor, is brief comments by council.
Right. Let me first take a moment to offer, I think, our condolences to Miriam Restrepo, who works in the clerk's office, on the loss of her husband. Also, Adriana Restrepo, who works in the community center, and her husband, David, and CJ as well, Adriana's son. We're just thinking positive thoughts for Miriam in this time of grieving, and wishing all the best to her family. Next, I want to talk, as many of you have become aware, the Miami-Dade County Board of County Commissioners will be meeting on Thursday to discuss the mayor's proposed RFP that she wants to submit regarding the Rickenbacker and the Venetian Causeway. I know you all have seen some materials about that. Essentially, I'll be going to speak, and I just wanted to let you all know, I'll come back. I'll keep you all informed about what's going on. But I think the key, and I want to make sure we're all in agreement, we want to participate in this. We want the county, when they're going forward with this project, to engage us. We have, obviously, it's our only ingress and egress. We've been talking about this for years. I'm excited that they're contemplating a redevelopment of the Bearcut Bridge. But as to the Rickenbacker Causeway, we need to have a seat at the table. So I'm going to convey that message to them. We certainly understand that they want to move forward. We want to move forward. We want to make sure that it's about getting vehicular traffic and not just the cyclists across Virginia Key. So are we all in agreement on that? Does everybody sort of concur with that position?
Yeah, if I could just add, and I mentioned this to Commissioner Regalado at the parade, when we're talking about even cyclists, everything that I've seen of Plan Z seems to contemplate the more casual cyclist and the concerns of people on Key Biscayne or the Pelotons.
Understood.
And so when we talk about cyclists, just make sure that you're not confusing terms, in other words.
I'm not even going to get into that with them, but I just want to be clear that we are all in agreement that we want to be participatory in this process going forward.
Why don't I make it a motion so that we're
not going to take any action. It's a workshop.
No motion.
Let's just move it forward. I just wanted to
I think that we're all in agreement on that. And,
yes.
And I think that we could all say our top three priorities are obviously safety in terms of storm protection and egress and the cyclists
and think events. If we do want to bring anything to your point about having a motion, I think at our July 27th.
No, so that you feel fully back. That's what I was saying.
If you guys say so, I think I'm good.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else with brief comments?
I see Chief Lang here. I understand that in this tragedy that we're facing in Surfside, that we have two of our people working there, and I just think people should know that, and we ought to thank them. I cannot imagine the physical risk that they're taking, but also emotional, because this is I stopped watching it. I can't handle it anymore, and so I think we all make special thanks. And it reminded me that just about 20 years ago, our beloved Ron Albert was volunteered to go to, 9/11, and so I just sort of came together to me, and I think I want to also highlight. He was here last week, highlight his service, and he paid a price. There's no little health issues, and not so little, and just great tradition of Key Biscayne. Thank you, Chief, for committing to that tragedy of our people up north on Surfside.
It may be appropriate as well to maybe have a moment of silence. I mean, I think
yes, that would be good.
So maybe we can just.
And our best wishes to Ron and his lovely wife Victoria.
We could just have a moment. Thank you for that.
Mayor, just like one brief last thing. Following your instructions for us to keep an eye on Ed London when you were away, I just want to give you 2 highlights because the report would be too long. In the first meeting that he chaired, we had a reverend going to give us prayers. And for the first time, he didn't show up. That was very strange. And on the second meeting, no rabbi, no reverend volunteered to come. Now, you make your own judgments, but that was something that was very impressive to me. And also, he did a great job last week in the middle of a very, usually the community groups are very, he just picked up and left us with no designated. Nobody can operate that clock that you guys have. And personally, he left me stranded here.
You be careful what you all wish for.
Thanks to Mr. Kaplan, I was able to get home. That's my preliminary report on his activity.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Okay. And Councilmember McCormick?
My brief comment, I just wanted to thank the manager and his staff for the meeting they put together, which I think was an excellent opportunity to reach out to the community, but also to demonstrate, I'd call it a first step, but I know that it was far down the road for you and your staff, but a first step in terms of engaging the community and making sure that everyone living in condos and in high rises are aware that this council and that this government is committed to their safety and to doing what our part is and make sure that things are done correctly. And so I wanted to thank you. I thought it was an excellent meeting and I think it helped a lot of people in the community, but also just wanted to share that we will continue on that front. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. We got a great team and the great team that's behind it, and we're all ready to support the community as necessary.
Anybody else?
Great parade, great picnic after.
100%. Okay.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is public comments.
Pete, you want to read the instructions? I don't know if we have anybody, but.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you watching us on Channel 77 on Comcast, Channel 99 on AT&T Uverse, or streaming us live via our website, if you wish to make a public comment, please dial the following phone number, 305-365-7569. Then please enter the meeting ID of 231-627-8415. For those of you that are currently in the meeting and wish to speak, please dial *6 on your telephones or raise your hand via the Zoom app. Mr. Mayor, I have no one signed up to speak.
Okay, let's move on to the budget.
Is there anyone in the audience?
Oh, does anybody in the audience want to speak? Okay, let's move on.
Next item, Mr. Mayor, is budget presentations, the manager's strategic vision and fiscal year 22 budget estimate.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. You have the con.
Good evening, Mayor Davey, council members. Tonight's my pleasure to kick off the fiscal year 22 budget process. The staff and I will be presenting to you my vision for next year and the resources we believe are needed to deliver the services, programs, and infrastructure our residents deserve and expect. First, I'd like to explain what this presentation is and also what it is not. First, what it is. This is a bold outline and where we believe we can take the village next year and how we want to position ourselves for the future years and address the threats we will face, such as sea level rise, flooding, environmental changes, aging public infrastructure, our facilities, roadways, and utilities, aging commercial, condominium and residential properties, as well as the associated maintenance backlog. Tonight, we'll mainly focus on our goals, the resources, the funds, and the people to achieve those goals, and then present the strategies to attack our budget on both the revenue and the expenditure side. And then we believe overall we can do better, and we'll talk about ways that we can increase revenues as well as decrease our expenses. I want to make sure to understand what this is not. This is not a line item budget review where we look at each account and each department in excruciating detail. We'll save that for September. the exciting time. Instead, in this meeting, I want to look at the bigger picture. First, so that together we can chart the direction we want to take the village. Then, with that guidance in mind, over the summer, we will right-size the line item portions of the budget to achieve our aggressive goals in the most efficient and effective way. Then, when September comes, during our 2 budget hearings, we will be able to take that discussion from the strategic level down to the tactical level and to address those line item budgets. So with that, Pete, if you get me to slide 2, and we'll start this.
Yes, sir.
So you're going to drive this thing, right, Pete?
Yes, sir.
All right. Oh, there you go. All right, I already talked a little bit about the purpose, but I want to talk a little bit about a few of the principles I want to make sure that we're following tonight.
Sorry.
Say again?
No.
Are you good, Pete?
Yep.
Okay. Even though we're looking at fiscal year 22, I also want to make sure that we're incorporating long term. So I want to make sure we're setting the conditions to where we want to be in the future. It's going to focus on results and outcomes, and we're going to talk about a number of those this evening. We want to make sure we always communicate with the public. We want to make sure we empower and get buy-in from our employees. Bottom line, it's something I've been saying from the moment I've been here. We want to increase customer service and the responsiveness of the staff. And one of the things I also think is important is that we are always stewards of public resources. A few caveats before we start. As you know, the village did not get the chance to hold its annual strategic session this spring. And so we're moving forward in this process without that guidance. But that's okay. We'll get an opportunity tonight to discuss that. Of course, fiscal year 20 and 21 budgets were very different because of COVID. So the execution that we saw will be significantly different, and therefore trend analysis will be a little bit different over the last 2 years. And then to be fair, after a couple weeks on the job, we really began this budget process around June 1st to about June 10th. So a few weeks, great work by the staff, great work by Benjamin in order to present you this presentation this evening. Next slide there, Pete. Oh, you're jumping. This is just a quick timeline so you can see what's going on. We discussed where we've been. We'll talk tonight about setting the millage cap. Obviously, we will receive guidance from council. Talk about what we're going to be doing over the summer in terms of manpower, as well as going deeper into the budget line items. And then our first and second hearings in September. And then, of course, our adopted budget moving into next year in October. Next slide. Here's our agenda tonight, and who and which department head will be presenting. Next slide. All right, so I took a bold stab at beginning to put forward a vision for the village. And of course, this is a work in progress. I've been working very, very closely with the vision board in the three or four meetings that we've had. And of course, this is not the end state of where I believe we want to be, but it's an opportunity to take a look at what I think and what I've seen is very important for the village. And I'll pick out words such as vibrant, high quality of life, a sense of place, a sense of community, thriving and resilient, and dedicated to elevating our island paradise. And you'll see that theme all the way throughout. And of course, it's a play on word. We want to enhance what this village is. Of course, we want to physically elevate it to take care of sea level rise and any other things that may be coming our way. And then I also think it's a psychological and mental approach of where we want to place ourselves as we move forward over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Next slide, Pete. Here's our mission, and this is my directive to the staff. Very straightforward, but I think what's important in the mission statement is I wanted to highlight and pull out the importance of us working with our community and regional partners. I've said it before, and I truly believe it, that as a small island community, we can't do it by ourselves. So I want to make sure that we get better, stronger, more relationships with the people who can assist us to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. Otherwise, straightforward, public safety, services, infrastructure to help our residents live, play, and work and what I consider a very vibrant, thriving, and resilient island paradise. You can see the values that I wish to instill in our employees, many of which are already there. We just want to take it to the next level. And we'll talk more about that throughout the summer. And one of my goals you'll see later is to build a value-based team that is dedicated to supporting their village, as well as working very closely with their colleagues. So here are the priorities and goals that I like to start with. And you can see the capital letters, the capitalized priorities. Those four: improve community resilience and sustainability, all the way down to deliver more efficient government. Those four have been the standing priorities for the village for the last 3 years. I didn't want to change those. I wanted to use that framework to start. But what I did add is enhancing collaboration and communication. Again, you'll see that theme throughout this entire thing. Again, going back to small village, important to have relationships. Everyone's a part of the solution. And I want to make sure that's a very important priority and goal for this community. You'll also see, and we'll talk further in the presentation, how I've outlined a goal under each one of those priorities. And what that does is set the conditions for future for us to also come up with objectives to achieve those goals. So that's the framework that I'm looking at in terms of what I want to achieve in fiscal year 22. That'll set the conditions of the different projects, the different service and different programs we want to pursue, and also the resources we are requesting to achieve those items. Next slide. So the best part of the evening, I'm going to turn it over to Benjamin to talk about our revenue projection.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. So let's jump into the revenue. So I wanted to just highlight some of the main revenue sources. On the subsequent slide, we'll get into the detail on a line item basis. Obviously, the biggest portion of our revenue comes from ad valorem taxes, and it's roughly 70% of our entire village revenue. The Miami-Dade Property Appraiser's Office in June 1st had a preliminary estimate of a 0.7% increase. This is following 3 straight years of declining taxable values. After these slides were published, the property appraiser released their July 1st numbers, and that number upticked to about 0.8%. So there was another $6 million in property value that was assigned to Key Biscayne. As you notice here, so the final number was $8.269 million after the July 1st number was released, but it's still less than where we were at our 2018 tax roll, which is about $8.5 billion. However, we're optimistic that this number is eliminated this downward spiral and it's starting to increase. Additionally, with the utility taxes, we talked to Florida Power and Light, and they're going to be requesting a rate change, a rate increase with the Public Service Commission in November. Unfortunately, the decision in November will be after we're required to set our budget in October. So we're taking a conservative estimate. They'll be requesting a double-digit increase. That double-digit increase will affect 2 of our revenue sources. One of those is our municipal electric tax, and the other one is our franchise fee. If you remember, a couple of years ago, we entered into a direct franchise fee agreement with Florida Power and Light at 6% of the electric fees. So we'll be following that closely. We're going to take a more conservative approach because we don't expect they're going to receive all of that 10% increase, especially coming off of some tough economic times following the pandemic. Additionally, to highlight the state revenue share, sales and use tax distributed based on the population. These numbers have kind of bounced back based on pre-COVID levels. We saw a reduction, obviously, in sales tax in March, April, and May of last year as economic activity subsided. But now we've noticed strong trends in our revenue, and those are fully rebounding for fiscal year 22. Lastly, I'd like to highlight our service charges, and this is where you'll see a big increase compared to fiscal year 21's budget, but still less than where we were historically pre-pandemic levels. We're going to be budgeting about 75% of our pre-COVID levels in terms of the community center. Obviously, they're opening up now, and we expect this trend to continue within fiscal year 22, but we expect it to start slowly in October, November, December, and then pick up full steam. So we thought it would be appropriate to budget at about 75% of our pre-pandemic levels. The other area that was vulnerable to the pandemic was with our building fee revenue. We had a huge downturn in activity, obviously, during the stay-at-home orders, but that's also started to rebound throughout the end of fiscal year 21 and into and we expect into 22 those to rebound as well. Next slide, Peter. So here it is on a line item budget. Jumping out will also be $3 million of grants. I'd just like to explain what that is now, and we'll get into detail later. The majority of that $3 million is $2.7 million from the Federal Administration's American Rescue Plan Act that was signed in February. We're expecting $2.7 million both in this current fiscal year, 21, and then an additional $2.7 million, which is part of this $3 million for fiscal year 22. With additional grant funding, we have two $50,000 FERDAP grants for Hampton and Lake Park, and a $200,000 FERDAP grant, which will offset some of the costs approved for the 530 Crandon Park. Next slide, please. The other area I'd like to highlight is within debt service. There are some major positive changes here for the village. So I'd like to highlight our fiscal year 21 activity, because obviously what we accomplished in 21 is paving the way for 22 and brought us to these savings. So probably the most important one is earlier this year in January, we took advantage of some historically low interest rates, and we refinanced and consolidated $11.3 million of existing outstanding debt at 1.235%. This results in $75,000 of annual savings, which we'll receive over the next 10 years. The other activity during 21 is the maturing of the Civic Center 2011A bond, and that will reduce debt service in the amount of $777,000. And lastly, we matured some equipment and auto loans. We actually paid it off early because there was an interest rate savings when you compare what we were paying versus what we're receiving in the bank for our savings. It made financial sense to pay this off early, which resulted in a savings of $476,000 going forward. So the first three bullet points are all favorable to the village and savings. The fourth bullet point, a couple of months ago, we issued new debt. We issued $750,000 to finance a new fire engine at 1.76%, and we'll be paying that off over the next 10 years at $86,000 in annual debt service. If you combine the savings in the first three bullet points with the increased cost of the fourth, the total impact is $1.26 million less debt service in fiscal year 22 than in 21. So that's a 38% reduction in expenditures. Highlighting what's going to happen in fiscal year 22, we're going to be maturing the Civic Center 2011 bond, which will have a reduction in $686,000, which we'll feel the impact of when we do the fiscal year 23 budget. And additionally, the Civic Center and Land Acquisition 2011 bond going into 23 will reduce it by $229,000. So you'll notice a lot of the 2011 activity were all 20-year bank notes, and that's why this is the time where they're all maturing. The other point I'd like to mention, not so much for tonight's presentation because this is more focused on the general fund, but there's additional debt in the Transportation Special Revenue Fund, and that was to finance the Crandon Boulevard Phase 3 improvements. On the flip side, the revenue source that we pledged for that debt service is also expiring, which was the $365,000 Rickenbacker Tollway revenue share that we received each year. So the revenue is going away, but also the matching debt service is going away. So it's a net neutral to the village. Next slide, please. And here's kind of what I highlighted in the line item view. So you'll notice two things here. Obviously, the 38% reduction in debt service, but also that we consolidated the debt. So you'll notice a lot less line items as it's been consolidated, which is much easier administratively to manage. Any questions on both revenue and debt service before we move on?
First, just thank you, Benjamin, for the consolidation and the work you've done on this. 38% less in debt service is pretty darn good. So thank you for doing this. I think it proves,
I have one question, Mike.
Proves the worth of your position and what you brought to it. So thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry, Councilmember London and then Councilmember McCormick. I'm sorry. Benjamin,
when you were looking at the revenues increasing on the 175, 185 monies, basically they're a function of insurance premiums, nothing to do with, and what did you forecast for an increase in insurance premiums to get your increase in 175, 185 funds?
So I actually budgeted both the 175 and 185 numbers flat at last year's amount. I made inroads with the Division of Retirement Services to try to get insight into what that number would be, but they don't know it until August. So when in doubt, I go conservative and budget the same as last year. The other item to notice is that revenue is just a pass through. So if that revenue were to increase because insurance premiums increased, you would see the offsetting expenditure in the same amount, because whatever we receive from the Division of Retirement, we then expense and send to the pension board. So it's really a net neutral to the village budget.
Well, that's not, I disagree with you, because basically we can use that money to reduce our contribution to the pension funds. So it's not net neutral. It's actually a major savings to us. I think you can conservatively look at insurance premiums probably going up across the state of close to 20%, which would increase the revenue of 175 and 185 even greater.
So if I may, Councilmember London, the impact of those increased premiums, you're right, it will reduce a future pension cost. The issue is timing. So when we receive our actuarial impact statement, it's done on October 1st of the prior year to determine the percentage of payroll that we'll have to pay. Obviously, the more we receive from the Division of Retirement, the less the village will have to pay into the pension as a percentage of covered payroll. So I can already tell you the impact from the prior year where we received increased Section 175 and 185 revenue, where we had in fiscal year 21, the village paid about 18% of covered payroll for the fire department. That number, which is in this budget tonight, has been reduced to 15% of covered payroll. So it does have an impact, but to a future year.
Councilmember McCormick.
Benjamin, you mentioned that despite the months with lockdown of the decrease in sales tax revenue and building department revenues, that you've seen an uptick and that it's getting back to normal. I'm just wondering specifically if you mean it's back to normal on a month-to-month basis, or has it bounced back so much that you think year to year where?
So the building department revenue, I'd say, has fully rebounded and is beyond our projections from fiscal year 21. The community center, however, is not there yet. What we experienced was a lot of refunds that were still being issued as people decided whether they would never come back and they wanted a refund of their annual membership. For accounting purposes, you don't feel the entire impact, because what you end up doing is you defer a lot of the cost of those annual memberships. So to break this down, if somebody buys an annual membership in the month of September, even though you received 12 months of revenue in September, you really defer to the following period and recognize 1 month in this fiscal year and 11 months to the future fiscal year. So as those monthly memberships getting used and people come back, that's when it gets recognized. But we're still not there yet. And that's why we're conservatively estimating about 75% of pre-pandemic levels for the community center.
Okay. And sales tax, was that coming back on a monthly basis? Like our months are back to normal, or do you expect that back for the year?
Our months are back to normal. And that happened really fast. So by about, I want to say July or August of last year, we already noticed the sales tax numbers had bounced back. Additionally, gas tax as well. And sales tax also impacts our transportation fund, because the CITT is the half-cent sales tax in Miami-Dade County also funds it's a revenue share of transportation. So those numbers bounce back the fastest, I want to say.
Okay, so you think on an annual basis, we're looking pretty good?
Correct.
What's going on with the Crandon revenue share?
So there was I believe a 20-year agreement with the Rickenbacker Tollway, and those funds were pledged almost entirely to fund that debt service on the Crandon Boulevard improvements. So that agreement expires, but also the debt matures. So no more revenue, no more debt service.
Okay. Anybody else on this item? Okay, let's move forward.
So what I'd like to do, Mr. Mayor, council members, I'd like to bring up each one of our directors. They'll give a SWOT analysis of what they're looking at, obviously their strengths, improvements, as well as their opportunities, threats, and constraints. I would like to give them an opportunity to present, and then also stand by for any questions from the council. Jake?
Out there, Jake?
Come on down.
Oh, there he is. Oh, he's in person.
He's still out there. Am I live?
Yes.
Okay.
As live as you're going to be.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The SWOT analysis. To give a quick overview, I guess everyone would agree that the biggest threat to the Public Works Department is the climate change. And aging infrastructure coupled with deferred maintenance due to budgetary constraints has held the department back from improving level of service. Through this budget estimate process, we identified a number of areas where we can make improvements and make an immediate impact to the community. The areas that you're going to see later on in the presentation that they're looking for is hiring additional personnel to provide simultaneous focus on operations and mid to long-term goals, revamping our capital improvements program, having a programmatic approach to facilities and fleet, and also having a sound contract management and oversight in place. Good news is that, which is our strength, we have a knowledgeable personnel and set of skills internally to provide leadership and undertake these projects with supplemental personnel if approved. That's what I have for the Public Works. I'll go with the BZP. Can I have the next slide?
Before you make that jump, Jake, are there any questions to Public Works directly before we talk about BZP? You get a bye, Jake. Next slide.
No, go back. You have to go back to BZP now, Pete, because they went Public Works, then BZP. There you go.
Okay. I also have Renee Velasco, the bill official with me. Renee, if you want to come up and join me, if you want to say a couple of things. But so one of the biggest threat to the building department is economic fluctuations and kind of not being able to see the future, as the COVID proved us that how not resilient we were, and we were shut down in a quick notice, and we're not able to provide the services at the same level that we did in person. And also one of the opportunities that we have moving forward, going electronic permit review and digitizing our records, and I guess catching up with technology and providing service to our residents that everybody else does. And where we where we identify improvement is, again, personnel side, again, additional personnel to provide digitizing our records, electronic plan review process, and keeping up with the technology. And I'll have Renee.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Basically, summarizing what Jake said, going over the strengths and needs for improvement, opportunities and challenges of our department. Strengths, we have a skillful, knowledgeable group of state and county certified professionals with many years of experience in the industry and right here at the village. We assist with the enforcement of state and local codes to protect the safety and well-being of our community. We do this with a strong emphasis on providing high level of customer service by offering guidance and support to our customers, residents in their projects. To maintain and improve our strong points, we have identified the same thing that Jay was talking about, the GIS program, establish a plans review, electronic plans review process. And this will allow us to provide the community a transparent, quick access to records and the status of your project. The successful improvement of these items will become opportunities that will help us to meet the challenges presented here going forward. Thank you.
Any questions from up here right now? Okay, well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Oh, there's Todd.
Good evening. Our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space SWAT, the 2020 survey confirmed the customer service from the village remains strong and that Parks and Recreation remains a priority to keep us gainers. Needs improvements and threats. While items like our access to playing fields have consistently needed improvement and remained a threat, the department's aging infrastructure and deferred maintenance are becoming high priorities. This doesn't mean that steps haven't been taken recently to address this. The new scoreboards have been installed in the gym. The second floor refresh is complete and looks great. We're finalizing the 5-year cardio replacement, and the first floor wall covering is soon to be replaced. The manager's initiative to create a 5-year CIP process will allow us to address these big ticket items like the aging HVAC systems that and they'll be included in a systematic approach to address these long-term maintenance needs. Opportunities. I'm excited that there's been some minor movement with adjacent agencies that might provide access to playing fields. And I'm thrilled that after almost 20 years, we get to deliver on a park at 530 Crandon. Any questions?
Councilmember Laredo? You're not on right now. You're muted. Oh, you might have touched the button. Don't touch the button.
Hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Thank
gotcha.
you. Apologize. I know. I want to thank him. Everybody in the staff is in the village has gone through a very difficult year, but I think Parks and Recs are particularly, as police and fire, and the brunt of trying to do a balancing act that is very difficult, particularly since the anxieties are so high in individuals, parents, children, et cetera, and not only the outstanding work you've done, but priority, not drifting 1 minute from their priority about safety to maintain extraordinary diplomatic skills. Sometimes in Key Biscayne we get too excited, and and sometimes we ask with the wrong tone. But I think you ought to be commended and your staff, and look forward to it. And second of all, as you heard me say before, I think if you ought to look under needs improvement, we need a little bit more space for outdoor activity for seniors. I've seen, even before their Tai Chi classes, they're poorly cramped into the back of the bathrooms there. They are really overlooked. We have great program in Ask, but just as you play it so that they can have some of those outdoor activities when the weather gets better, so that they're not second-class citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kaplan?
Sensitivity point. The last bullet under threats is parking. And I just think it's worth mentioning, my impression of our kind of policy over the years has been we're not going to build enough parking, and nor should we try to magically solve for that problem. And so the solution has always been to try to reduce the dependency on single-trip automobiles.
That's right.
I'd just like to speak to that. So when you articulate this policy going forward, you bear that in mind.
I agree.
Absolutely. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Evening. Mr. Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. A little bit about the fire rescue. Our strength, without question, is our people. And we build our service on people. Councilmember Laredo, thank you very much for recognizing some of the folks that are volunteered on USAR, which is the Urban Search and Rescue Team. You mentioned Ron Herbal. Ron, along with 4 other responders from Key Biscayne, went to 9/11. As part of this deployment, we have 2 of our responders up there. Justin Connors, he's one of our lieutenants, and Captain Jeff Liversedge, who was also at 9/11, along with the entire USAR team. And uniquely, all 8 USAR teams in the state of Florida were activated, along with a number of other federal teams, to come down and support. And the experience that those individuals get and are able to bring back are unbelievable. And it pays dividends tremendously. And you mentioned the mental health component. We have 3 members on what we call the peer support team. And we put a lot of focus on peer support, which is supporting the mental health of our responders. Sometimes things happen here in our fire station that we need to support each other. Sometimes something will happen in another department and we'll support. And we also have some peer support that's deployed as part of the state deployment. I've had the opportunity to go up there a few times, and anything that we can do representing the village to support Surfside I know it's amazing. And we've had interactions at every level, at the local, at Surfside, at the county level, at the state level, and the federal level. And I just want to thank our manager for the support in that. That said, I think our workforce is amazing as our strength. The services that we offer, and one of the things that I'm extremely proud of, besides our technical competencies and our ability to change the outcome of our emergencies, is the ability to deliver exceptional customer service. You've seen that on the community surveys. You see that on our feedback that we get when we do our surveys on an annual basis. And we're one of the top performers in the country. As far as opportunities go in the fire department, there will be a lot of room for employee growth, a tremendous amount of training. We have been developing our future leaders, our future lieutenants. I have about 6 or 7 firefighters that are testing for lieutenants, and we're training them pretty intensely in critical thinking, conflict resolution, customer service, strategy, and tactics, in addition to a lot of our operational training. As you know, there's a tremendous amount of community risk that we're involved in today in supporting Jake and Renee and their staff with the building construction, all the way down to fire prevention. And as what's very passionate to pretty much everybody is our teens and our youth. So there's some incredible opportunities there. Jump into some of the threats. Recruitment, hiring, and retention remains one of my top priorities. We have a tremendous amount of turnover we're expecting over the next 5 years. And some of that we control and some of it we don't. We're ready for disasters, and those will always remain a threat to us. I don't think anybody could have been prepared for what occurred in Surfside. And but I can assure you that if it was going to happen anywhere, Miami-Dade County and the state of Florida was prepared, and they did a phenomenal job. As far as needs improvements goes, it's pretty much all about staffing for us. You will see the manager will be looking to add some staff to our fire prevention, which we can quantifiably tell you what's needed in fire prevention in order to just do the inspections and keep up with the inspections. Our succession planning is pretty much our primary focus in the fire department. The number of people that we're going to be turning over the next several years, and I guarantee you, you'll be hearing that in budgets to come. And I'm working with the manager extremely closely to plan for that succession. And I'm available for any questions.
Yeah, sure.
Councilmember Laredo.
I know today is not to get into the nitty gritty, but I'm struck by, under threats, constraints, aging infrastructure and equipment. I mean, our firehouse is not even 20 years old, is it? 20 years old. And, you know, since I've been here, every equipment, including the last one that you said you needed, we've gotten you. So I don't understand this constraint threat. We have prioritized you and police, I thought.
I understand. So yes, we opened the fire station in 2002. It was almost just after the anniversary of 9/11. And there's work that we have to do to maintain it. I think I've heard you actually speak, and I know I spoke with other council members about the broken window syndrome. We work pretty hard to maintain our facility looking good. There's work to be done. I think we had a few air conditioners seem to fail over the years. There's some waterproofing work that we need to get done. We have some leaks in some of the bathrooms. There's basically the ongoing maintenance of a facility that gets used 24/7.
But Chief, I didn't want to micromanage because it's against my philosophy. What I want to make clear that you understand us, I know you do, but the public, that we've really stood by you.
Yes.
I mean, you say you need X. I mean, maintenance and all of that, that's part of your job definition. I mean, unless I'm wrong, because I'm asking not to probe it, just to say if you need something else from us. I can't imagine. We pretty much, within the constraints that we have, we've been very supportive. I
agree. You have been supportive.
Okay.
We've got new trucks, new equipment, and I don't think the idea of putting that on there wasn't to say we're not supported. It was just something that we need to be planning for.
You know how I am about clarifying. Okay,
I understand.
Thank you. We prize you.
And council member, I think what's important to say there is, when any facility starts hitting the 20-year mark, that's really when you begin to shift from, regular, preventive maintenance into really starting to do maintenance and repair. So the costs begin to shift. And that's why you'll see it. Because all three of these facilities are just about hitting 20 years.
My point is still the same.
Yeah, same point.
Okay.
Understood.
Anybody else? But we do take care of them. We do.
I understand. And yes. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody else with questions for the chief? All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to jump in before our new police chief comes up. First thing, number one, this is his first opportunity to speak to you in public. So here's his chance. And I just want to, number one, congratulate him for stepping up to be our chief, number one. And then also for the amazing support he provided this weekend. Not an issue gone by. He was on top of things. It worked smoothly. And I just want to thank you personally, Jason. And I want to just present him to the council as our interim police chief going forward.
I want to do the same, welcome in this role. Looking forward to having you around for a little.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jason Eunice, Interim Chief of Police. Our department conducted its SWOT analysis and identified several strengths that I'd like to highlight for you all tonight. The department provides a high level of policing service. We have quality, skilled, and motivated police officers. We are well equipped, thanks to the village and the support of the managers. We have boats, vessels, vehicles, bicycles, and other great equipment that we enjoy and are able to operate and do our jobs with. Some of the needs that we could improve on, we highlighted traffic safety, which is important in traffic safety enforcement, to include cars, golf carts, bikes, and pedestrians. Crime prevention and community policing initiatives through crime suppression details and community engagement programs. We need to do more of those. And social media. I think we need to communicate better and deliver our message to the community in a better format. Some of the opportunities we also identified was the creation of a community resource team. We want to also elevate community youth programs and education. We'd like to increase presence through patrolling on foot, bikes, motorcycles, and increasing our maritime safety to prevent any issues out in the water and deal with nuisances. And I think we could do that with the personnel that we have. We identified some threats, and the police department could become reactive versus proactive if we don't have the proper manpower or staffing based upon the expectations of the village. The misinformation to public and community is basically through social media. What we want to do is we want to do a better job through social media to deliver timely and accurate information to the public. We want to be as transparent as possible and making sure that that information is being pushed out as quick as possible. So, and overtime, there's always a threat to overtime if we're not adequately staffed and we're constantly shifting personnel and having to use our specialized units to enhance our patrol. So we have a plan that we're working on this summer with the staff that I have right now and the leadership. We were able to enhance our night shift and at the same time significantly reduce the overtime that we were doing. Basically, I think almost eliminating it. So I'll have a better picture to that in a couple of weeks, and I'll report that to the manager. If you have any questions, I'll willing to take them.
Okay, Councilmember Kaplan.
Thank you for stepping up, Chief, and congratulations on the things that have happened in your life.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
I just wondered if you could elaborate on what does a community resource team consist of, and what is its purpose, and how do you see that?
Several years back, and I think Councilman Cigarola, I specifically remember an event where we had with you at Novecento, where we were introducing community resource officers. We had them engaging with the businesses, some of the neighborhoods, doing crime prevention, meeting and understanding what the problems in these certain areas were of the community and addressing those areas. They would bring it back to the patrol, and then in turn, we would find solutions and programs to be able to address those problems. And I think that's important because we're able to communicate. They're able to understand who that person, have a face to that area, to that community, or to that neighborhood, or that business or shopping center. And conversely, we also have our patrol officers engaged, or if it's an investigative issue, we introduce the detectives into that problem to try to solve whatever's going on. Unfortunately, Marjory Stoneman Douglas happened, and we had to pull those resources off and put them into the schools. What we want to do is we're asking for 2 more officers so that we can recreate this program and also engage in the schools and the community. So that's what that program's about.
Thank you, Chief.
Anybody else have any questions? Oh, Councilmember McCormick.
I saw that you talked about the Marine Patrol and wanting to sort of amp it up a little bit in terms of presence. I just wanted to, well, first I should have started by saying welcome and thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
But just to reiterate that we've had a lot of issues going on, which I'm sure you're aware of, but that we have residents that are really concerned with what is happening specifically at the sandbar off of Harbor Point, and that, as this summer continues and we have the officers not in the school, that it's important that we keep the focus there and the presence as much as we can.
Yeah, it's gotten a good direction from the manager, and I understand that that's one of our priorities for the summer. So that is an issue that we're definitely addressing and on top of. And we also got to look at the ocean side as far as the kite surfers and situation safety over there. So we're on it. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Mike?
Ed, was that you?
It's me.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you?
Good. Go ahead.
Hi, Jason. How are you?
Oh, Jason, Chief, you need to come back up. Yeah, you didn't escape. He ran. I don't think I've seen Jason move that fast to get back to his seat as when he thought Ed wasn't paying attention. All right, go ahead, Ed.
Jason.
Mr. London.
What I heard you, Captain Eunice, what I heard you say sounds fantastic, because I think you're saying that we're talking about community policing, beat policing, like I've been trying to get for the last 8 years. You guys are going to do that going forward?
Yes, sir.
Is that what I hear?
Yes, sir. That's our plan, sir.
Thank you. I am very, very happy. Good luck.
And not only that, I can add, Councilmember, that today, I saw the bicycle police around 3 times.
Good.
Yeah, they've been out more.
Good.
Yep. So they're out.
We've got clear direction, and we're doing what we need to do. So I appreciate the manager's support on this.
Thank you.
And Councilman London, Chief Eunice and I have got a challenge. We're both reading Bill Bratton's new book, The Profession. So if you want to join us, we can have a 3-group book club and talk about it. I think you'd really enjoy what he has to present. It's right up your alley, Philadelphia style.
Thank you.
Count me in on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
Mr. Manager.
Okay, I think we have one more. We can SWOT analysis, and Benjamin is going to present the admin and finance overview.
All right, so admin and finance. I know it just says admin and finance. It's really representing the entire manager's office. So that's finance, budget, procurement, human resources, information technology, and communications, all wrapped into.
No, and I apologize. At the beginning of the meeting, I was supposed to tell you that we added this one in. We actually had it, as Benjamin mentioned, we had it broken down into 4 different ones. We realized that was too much. I consolidated. So if you're able to read that. Okay, good. Thank you.
All right. So as the manager mentioned, this is the consolidation of the entire administrative department into one slide. The first I'd like to highlight our strengths, financial transparency and accountability. That's not just me mentioning that. We've been recognized by outside third parties, both with our external auditors with clean audit opinions and also with the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, with continued accolades in financial reporting. Additionally, I'd like to highlight the village's debt position. We went over some slides earlier about the big reduction in debt service. I'd also like to mention that we've maintained our debt ratings with outside parties. Both S&P and Moody's were rated AAA and AA1, which is very high credit rating for a municipality. And last year's strength is increasing our revenue captures and opportunities. On the needs improvement side, I want to highlight village-wide contract management and oversight. As we get into the slides later, we discuss in further depth more related to the procurement functions and managing our contracts to ensure we get best pricing and value to the village. Additionally, in a needs improvement, I'd like to highlight the agenda, process, and organization. We're trying to implement a software solution that creates efficiencies in preparing for these council agendas and collaborating between different departments, the admin office, and also with our village attorney's office. In the opportunities section, I'll highlight the improvement of collection rates, and I think we've already started to seize on this opportunity. We've made great strides with Miami-Dade County to increase our collection rate on both the stormwater fees and solid waste utility fee. Additionally, and this was brought up in the last council meeting, was implementing an ERP system module. We took the first step in introducing our new ERP financial module, and it allows for additional module add-ons. And one of the ones I'd like to highlight is a module for citizen engagement, where residents, stakeholders alike would get live look-ins into our budgets throughout the year. So we wouldn't have to wait for just when our CAFR's presented or when we do these budget meetings. From the comfort of your home, you get a live look into the village's finances. For threats and constraints, the first one is a big one, the over-reliance on ad valorem for revenue sources. As we mentioned in the earlier slide, ad valorem historically makes up about 70% of our village revenue. So we'd like to get less reliant on ad valorem and look at opportunities for whether it's increasing or improving collection rates on existing revenues or thinking outside the box into new revenues. And we'll highlight some of those new revenues later in the presentation tonight. One of their bullet points is keeping pace with changes in technology and cybersecurity threats. I'm sure you're all aware we had a data incident a few years back, and also in the news you read about these kind of cybersecurity threats and how they impact both the private and public world. So those are threats that we constantly realize and prepare to deal with.
Any questions on this subject?
I just have a
Hold on.
question.
Councilmember Laredo, and then I think Councilmember London, you were somewhere in the background.
Yep.
And Pete, if you could go to the speaker view when we're having these Q&A so folks at home can follow along, please.
No, I just wanted to thank you for the difference you made since I was sworn here 2 years ago. I was in shock what I found in terms of financial control. So to me, it's before you and after you. We're moving in the right direction. And even though it pains me to praise Ed London, I I congratulate him for being very steadfast in insisting that we hire a capable CFO. And so it really has made a difference for me and for this village. We really are organized, and congratulations. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Councilmember Lennon, did you want to say something?
I did. Well,
Sorry,
Benjamin,
you're muted. No, I'm just kidding. You're not. Go ahead. I just want to have a little fun there.
obviously, Benjamin, I'm responsible for you. See, you better.
Oh,
not
here you
screw
go.
up.
Yeah. There we go. Taking all the credit.
You're doing a great job, so keep it up. But the one thing we've been talking about, I don't know, 5, 7, 8 years, and I've been around 9 years, is the transparency. You mentioned the transparency on the financials is great. We have partial transparency right now for the public. At a prior meeting, we talked about transparency for everything. We talked about this long before you came on board. And I think I asked you or the manager previously that for this budget cycle to put together what it would cost and what would be involved in making everything that council does, the government does, transparent. So people do not have to start with record requests and public information and pay for it because it doesn't make any sense. It should be available to everybody. Everybody is a partner or shareholder in our company, our village, our business. So my suggestion to you is before we have the line item budgets, please increase or please include a line item to make the village transparent and public and everything on the cloud so anybody can go get it. I don't expect you to go back and put everything we did for the last 30 years on public, but what is today, and then as people have excess time to go back from today moving backward. And that's what I'd like you to see done. Thank you.
Councilmember Moss?
Yeah, I'll just say that I think one thing that maybe should be added to threats would be rising interest rates for whenever we're doing finance. And the other thing is I just want to thank the manager and all the department heads for doing the analysis. It's something I've been looking for years. And I think it really helps clarify each department and where we want to go and what we already have. So I think this has been very, very helpful for all of us. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment? Okay, let's move on. Thank you.
All right, Pete, if you would, our next slide. So now we want to take the transition into analyzing ourselves and talking about some of our opportunities and as well as our threats and revisit our strategic priorities and begin to talk more about the goals. And what I'd like to do is in the next subsequent slides following each one of the goals, 1 through 9, is to discuss some of the specific things we want to achieve in FY22 and this budget that we are asking will help us to achieve. And what I try to do, and I asked my folks to come up with the things that are tangible, things that we can see, we can touch, we can feel, things that will actually improve this community and our residents will actually be able to benefit from it. So what you'll see over the next slides, I know you've had a chance to look through that, are many of those things. I won't talk about all of them, but please ask me about them if you have any questions. But I'll go through them step by step and then roll it up at the end if you have any questions. Next slide there, Pete. So the first one is the resilience and environmental sustainable community. And the focus here is mainly on infrastructure. And if you take those first 3 bullets together, what that really means is putting together a long-term plan that tells us where we want to go, putting in that interim 5-year capital programs to begin to go after the problem that we're facing, dealing with sea level rise, flooding, shoreline stabilization, our roadways, and undergrounding utilities. My goal is by next summer to have an integrated plan to address all 5 of those issues we're facing and be able to move forward either late FY22 or the beginning of FY23 to begin either utilizing our stormwater bond capacity and if necessary, stepping out and moving our general obligation bond. The other items I want to highlight is eliminating our remaining septic tanks. We had an opportunity to talk to Durham last week. They are actually counting our numbers at about 50, 55, less than the 69 that we were asking. We're gonna reconcile that with them to make sure we're counting the right numbers. We also asked them to begin to enforce, to begin to fine, so that we can begin to get the remaining 50 some odd folks off of septic tanks. Time is now. We just have to get it done. Another one I want to highlight is enacting seawall and land use ordinances to begin to look at how do we protect our shorelines. I want to promote water quality. A big push by the county is to protect Key Biscayne. It's right our backyard, to Biscayne Bay. It's our backyard. We should be a part of it. And I've asked Roland Samimi to be a part of figuring out how we can do better. The other one I've also asked him to do is ensure energy efficiency, whether that being using solar energy, transitioning to LED, and also looking at EV charging across the village. Any questions on goal 1?
Just an observation.
Yes, sir.
The first 3 bullets dealing, the emphasis is properly on infrastructure. It seems to me that it might be a slightly subordinated but still important emphasis to focus on land acquisition simultaneously. So I think to add that as a specific placeholder for your consideration.
Got it.
Steve, Mike, am I muted still, Michael? Or am I speaking?
We can hear you, Vice Mayor. Go ahead.
Steve, why do we have to wait for a year for an integrated plan? This is high priority. We've been waiting and waiting. You're on board. True, you haven't been on board very long, but why can't we move that up to put that a high priority number 1 thing and have it done by beginning of the year, not by towards the end of next year? That is my thinking. Switch things around, but I think most of us agree that going forward, that is priority 1.
It is, if not my highest priority, one of my top 3. And if I can move it faster, I certainly will. I learned a long time ago is to not overpromise, but if I can get it done quicker, you are certain that I will definitely move to get it done quicker.
Is there anything we can do to help you get it done quicker?
Yes, in fact, we'll get to that in a few slides.
Okay.
Building drama.
Nice setup, Councilman. I like that. All right, next slide, if you would, Pete. Goal 2. Again, the idea of creating a more walkable, accessible, and safe multimodal community. A couple of ones that we want to highlight is improving Crandon Boulevard, not just the traffic, but also the pedestrian flow and safety. We had a great meeting with the county last Friday where they came down with about 7 different people from the administration, as well as 2 members from Commissioner Regalato's office. This new mayor is serious about pedestrian safety. This new mayor is serious about traffic safety. And I think we have a great opportunity to move forward on this. One of the things I've done here, and I'm also going to do in other opportunities, is offer us as a pilot opportunity for any entity to use Key Biscayne as a demonstration or a pilot of a program they want to implement. One of the reasons I think we're well suited for that is, number 1, we're small. Number 2, we're relatively low bureaucracy. We're very agile, and I think it's an opportunity to get some good feedback, an opportunity to see if some programs are working. So again, they came down with a program called Zero Vision, the idea of reducing pedestrian safety issues. And we're going to jump on top of that. You get some feedback sometime this or next week on that.
And if you can package it, we can sell it as a consultant service.
You've got my future plan set already.
You like consultants in that direction.
Exactly.
Going out the other way. Of course, want to increase rideshare. It's been an amazing, even through COVID, we saw good ridership, but since COVID, it's just exploded. We've looked at taking the circulator off of circulation and moving it to on demand. And so that's going to significantly increase our ridership by about 1,000 more per month. And then we're in the process of looking to bring on 2 more freebies over the next year. So we could actually increase our ridership of close to, would that add up to 4,400 a month. And I think we can keep going. I think this community wants it. They want more. And if we keep going, we'll do it. Another thing that we're looking at that the county offered as well is a commuter from downtown Key Biscayne to the Vizcaya station. And again, that'll be an electrical vehicle, approximately 15 people. We'd use it again. That's an opportunity as a pilot, see how it works. Commuting time going out, obviously people doing business in Brickell or somewhere out in Miami. And then also an opportunity for some of our day workers to hit the station in Vizcaya and come into Key Biscayne in the morning. Another one of the big things that I noticed, one of the first things I did when I was walking around the village, was the pathways on the Village Green. And we've got money set in the budget to fix that. And we had a number of people come forward for that. And I think that's a great opportunity to improve what we look like and what we feel like. Accessibility, walkability to the public beach. We're finalizing the new easement agreements. And once we do that, obviously there's some of them that need improvement to create that better access and walkability. And then lastly, as the mayor mentioned before, is make sure we are at the table and we are part of the Rickenbacker Causeway improvements, whatever they might be. Next slide. Goal 3, creating and appealing and active public spaces, as well as engaging programs. And we got quite a lineup here. Todd, you got a lot to do this year, but I know I know you can do it, and we're right there to help you. And Jake's team is right there to help you right behind it. Constructing the park at 530 Crandon. My anticipation, we will have a kickoff meeting at the end of July. Construction will probably start in August or September, and we'll be at full blast in October, November, December, with a goal of completion by the end of the year. Great opportunity to bring something to this left off area that we have not taken care of for 20 years. Improve lake and beach parks. We have grants for both of those parks, and we'll talk about that in future slides. Improve Hampton Park. Again, we have another grant for that. Replace the Village Green splash pad. Resurface Calusa tennis courts. Take a look and improve the fields at St. Agnes, particularly the lighting. And then also, as you saw about a month ago now, is to continue the conversation with Miami-Dade County on bringing in the new library design. We've been in contact with the system, with Ray, and he's right on board to be designing it right there with us and being partnership. If you go down further, very important, and I know both chiefs mentioned it, and we're going to mention it again here, is target improve our youth programs. One of the things looking at doing is creating a task force of certain groups of people across the community and really trying to take a look at what youth programs we have out there, what ones are missing, and how we can fill those gaps. And looking at obviously the churches, our schools, community centers, our law enforcement, and anyone else who wants to come on board to improve and increase the number of youth programs that we have. And never forget, we want to make sure that we stay engaged with City of Miami and the possibility for athletic fields at Virginia Key as they take the waste dump and turn it into a 120-acre park. And that is one of the reasons why I brought on our new chief of staff. She was the portfolio manager for Virginia Key program, so she will definitely be able to help us in that endeavor. Next slide. So developing a vibrant and thriving local community and marketplace. This has been an area that perhaps maybe the village staff has not been involved with in as much detail that I think we could be involved with. And to be honest, if I could have my way moving into the future, I'd actually like to turn the building, zoning, and planning department into something like a community development department. So not only looking at building, zoning, and planning, but also trying to figure out how do we assist our businesses in economic development and improving their ability to be a part of our community. First step is we have, and we will continue to work with the Vision Board. Great relationship with Mario Garcia Serra and the rest of the board, and we're working hand in hand with that one. As time goes, as the council directs, we are ready to adopt any recommendations, and that can guide into our implementation and any of our master plans going forward. We want to discuss and assess options for the entry block and property at the entry block and what it can be. Another area we definitely have to look into is our National Flood Insurance Program CRS rating. We're currently at an 8. There's no reason why we can't get it down to a 7. And that is one of the things I've challenged our BCP director to do, is get us down to a 7, which will decrease our property tax, our property insurance rates, flood insurance rates by 5%, which I know will be well taken across the community. As we come out of COVID, we still have a waiver on our outdoor dining ordinances. And I want to relook that and figure out how we can make that a permanent part of the community that can benefit the community in terms of outdoor dining, yet at the same time ensuring it does not impact the merchants who want those parking spaces back. So it's going to be a give and take, and that's something we're going to work on over the summer and hopefully implement in fiscal year 2020. Another initiative I'd like to do is turn us into a Tree City USA. We already meet the criteria. We just have to document it, move it forward. There's a few things we'd have to tweak, but we can become a Tree City USA. That'll allow us to apply for certain grants, certain loans, and improve our ability to build out our tree canopy that I know we all want to do across the village. Part of that is developing a tree ordinance. And also I suggest we develop a tree trust fund as well. Next slide, Pete. A safe and well-prepared community. Again, this looks at three areas, which I think make this up. And I think both Eric and Jason have mentioned it very well on the things that they want to achieve. It's about policing. It's about fire and safety, emergency management, and as well as emergency medical services. So those are the things that we want to improve, continue to improve. And you can see some of the goals we have there. None of them are much different than what we've already been discussed by Eric and Jason. The one thing I would like to add at the end is improve our communication and timeliness of emergency information. We practiced this over the weekend or last week into the weekend, and I think we did a great job of getting the information out. Jessica was fantastic in working with Chief Lang, and I think we're well on our way to improve the way in which we share information as we lead into a disaster. Efficient and effective government services. And I hope Councilman London is out there listening. Some of the ones we want to tackle is, again, I've said it again, I'll continue to say it, customer service and responsiveness. Better contract management. We must do better on solicitations, we must do better on negotiations, and we must do better on our oversight. I want to make sure that we have better grant strategic programming. Right now, we're responsive. Oh, next slide, sorry. Yep. Come on, Pete, stick with me. Improve our grant strategic programming. Right now, we plug and play. We pick a grant for next year, and we hopefully we get it. If we do, we move forward with the project. If we don't, we may or may not move forward with that project. I want to get us into a 5-year program where we are looking out deep into the future and picking and choosing what grants we want to go after based on our capital plan. It doesn't always work that way, not always full success, but we can get much more strategic in the way we pick and go after our grants. Create a 5-year information systems and innovative implementation plan. You will find out later on one of my recommendations for our expenditures in reducing next year is to put a moratorium on any new IT system purchases until we figure out what we have, how to use it, and how to implement it into our operations. And we'll talk more about that later. And I know Benjamin mentioned this earlier, which is implement Socrata finance and procurement system. And Socrata is that system that allows the public to enter into our ERP system and create that transparency that people are looking for. Goal 7, next slide. Thank you, Pete. Build a values-based team dedicated to the success of the village. Can't do it without great employees. And I think we have some fantastic employees here. However, we still need to recruit, hire, and retain those quality employees. And I want to foster an environment of challenging hard work, however, with a sense of excitement and fun. If you can't have excitement and fun and being Key Biscayne, I'm not sure where you can have excitement and fun. And then lastly, probably one of the most important things that I feel is empower, motivate, and recognize our staff. We've got good staff, but if you don't tell them they're doing well, you don't recognize they're doing well, they go home and think this is just a job. So that's on me. That's my job to make sure that they feel like they're a part of the team. Goal 8, build and manage strong relationships and partnerships. We talked about it before. I've talked about it many times. We'll continue to talk about this. Probably the most important thing on this slide is that first bullet is not to have a random approach to our agendas with our state, federal, and local legislators and municipal partners, but to be very specific and targeted to the 3 or 4 items that we want to go after, and just keep ringing that bell over and over and over again. This is the help we need, and explain very clearly what it is we need in order to assist what we're trying to achieve at Key Biscayne. And I think the rest we've talked about.
Laredo is recognized.
Thank you. An observation as you move forward, and having been on the other side of being lobbied, it is the most effective thing to do is to reach out to these people, particularly when they're not in session, with a not ask, to invite them here for something to know us, instead of receiving the call and you say, oh my God, what are they asking for? Which is how we've been operating. It's sort of it works.
No, and I completely agree with you, council member.
And then when you get to the sessions, you have a very quick ramp up. Just a thought.
And sometimes that visit is an implicit ask without being an ask.
Yeah, but it needs to be not an ask, not even close.
I completely agree with you. But if you're showing them something about our village and they understand what it is, they begin to understand who we are, what we are, and what our values are. I completely agree with you.
Councilmember Kaplan?
Yeah, what we've done in the past that I think has been worthy is engage in work with people.
Yeah.
You know, through the League of Cities or what have you, show up and take on leadership positions, working with county commissioners and state officials. You work together, you get to know each other. They learn about our village, they learn about us. We have relationships.
That's right.
That's time well spent.
I appreciate all of these goals and all these things. This is your strategy for the next this year coming up, because this is a lot. I mean, I know a lot of these are long-term goals, 5-year goals, but this is an impressive. You've set yourself with some pretty big goals here. So I'm excited to see you, and I'm fired up, and I'll be here to help you out wherever I can.
I'm fired up, and with the proper resources, I think we can do this.
Excellent. Yep. All right, let's move on.
Goal number 9, proactively communicate, create relationships, and inspire constructive action. You should be, a matter of fact, I think I gave you a homework assignment over 4th of July to look at our website. And hopefully you can give us some feedback, particularly to Jessica. Our goal is to kick that off at the end of July. She's done an amazing job working with our directors. First time out, it's usually pretty good. Needs a little tweaks, but we hope to get that out and get that moving, because we need a better look, a better feel of how we present ourselves on the web. Same thing with VKB 311. We've had the system in place, but there's really no back end. There's no way really to make that happen. And that's one of the things that I'm asking my assistant to do, is to be a big part of putting that VKB 311 system in place, as well as integrating it with other customer service systems, whether that be standard phone call, whether that be an email, trying to figure out how we take in information from our residents and ensure that we get back to them responsively and with something that will actually solve their concern. And the other one I just want to do, you can read the rest of them, but I've had a number of requests from our elderly population on how do we better manage Channel 77. I've been amazed, and I've had some great conversations of how many people actually use that venue, and I think that's something we owe to that population, and we will take care of that.
Great.
So with that large agenda, I'll leave it open for any questions, so I can take a breath from speaking, and we'll jump into the next part when you all are ready.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the dais?
Pretty exciting stuff. All forward thinking. We're all motivated to stand by you and support in any way. That's great stuff.
Thank you, Councilmember.
All right. Next item.
So, in order to get things done, you obviously need the people and resources to do that. And what I've done is I've circled them into 6 different areas: customer service and responsiveness, accountability and enforcement. That's not only of ourselves, but of others. Public safety, resilience and sustainable infrastructure, community planning, and village appearance and functioning. 6 big things that I think we all talk about on a regular basis, and areas that we want to tackle going in the future. And so some of the resources that we need to tackle those items will follow. First slide. And what I've done is I've broken this down into 5 areas. What do I mean by customer service and responsiveness? The definition. What requirements we need, and those are the ones I will focus on. What's the value those bring? How much does it cost? And then what is the offset? Whether it's an actual money offset, whether it's an estimated financial offset, or whether there's a qualitative benefit from making that move. So that's how each one of the following 6 slides are structured. I'll go through it and hit mostly the requirements and the offset. But if you have any questions on the other items, please don't hesitate to ask. So for this item, we are asking to transfer the administrative assistant that's currently in Public Works to the manager's office.
Are you talking about customer service?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Pete, go back up to customer service, please, so folks at home can follow along. Thank you. He's all right.
We want to reclassify. We currently have 2 full-time permit clerks. We want to reclassify the 3rd part-time permit clerk to full-time. Not only will that provide better customer service on the floor, but what it will also do is assist our technical experts to do their job more. As particularly when we go to the electronic version and in using the system, they can be used as a way to set up the technical experts so they spend less time on the administration and allow them to do their technical skills, as well as they help speed the process up. So I think that's a big ask and something that our BCP and building official has asked for that in this time. We're also looking, and this is more structural than it is asking for a specific position, is figuring out how we integrate our communications and information technology services across the entire village. That's a total cost of $85,000. There is no direct actual or estimate offset. However, you can read at the bottom, we have 3, if not more, qualitative benefits to make this move. Next slide. Accountability and enforcement. And this is all about holding ourselves, our consultants, our contractors, local businesses, and our residents accountable. The things that we know we should be doing, our responsibilities, our policies, our agreements, and our ordinances. The requirements that we need to support this endeavor is to create and hire a procurement manager, create and hire a second code compliance officer, and create positions and hire 4 part-time beach rangers. The cost for these 3 is $255,000, and the offset is $215,000. Actual is the $15,000 from the registration for the kite surfers, and our estimated is $175,000 for improved contract management, $25,000 on consolidating, improving a village-wide office supply equipment service management process. Next slide, Pete. Public safety, all about safeguarding our residents. What we're proposing is creating and hiring 2 new police officers, and also creating a new full-time fire prevention inspector. This will be a civilian position, not a uniform position. Total cost, $338,000. Offset, $116,000. As you can see, the actual cost would be a reduction in cost of moving one of our deputy police chiefs to the position of lieutenant. $71,000 by eliminating a fire department admin assistant and records clerk. And an estimated reduction of $40,000 in police overtime and special pay. Next slide. Going back to resilience and sustainable infrastructure, I think one of the biggest asks that we're looking for right now is to create and hire a capital improvement program and grants manager. I'd also like to increase the engineer one's duties, skills, and expectation. And so what you'll see is I want to move that level up from a entry-level engineer to an engineer one, so you can actually do in-house designs and do project management and contract oversight. The two asterisks there right now is to identify that currently, as you know, I think it was back in February where we let the engineer go and we put the maintenance labor into that position. So the engineer position actually exists. So the only thing we would do is increase the salary to bring in a more skilled engineer. But later we're actually going to have to create the laborer position to put that labor into. Just a accounting drill, but just a clarification on what we're trying to do there. Total cost, $194,000. And this is a big estimate, but I believe this is a big payoff, is a $475,000 estimated benefit where you can get better grants, more grants, and other sources of funding by a dedicated person working on the capital improvement program and looking at our grants strategically, as I mentioned before. $150,000 savings in planning, programming, and design costs. We can begin to do stuff in-house that we haven't done before. And also $75,000 in project management costs. Both the capital improvement program manager and the engineer can now begin to do project management and hold our contractors to account, hold our consultants to account to make sure we get what we pay for. Community planning and development. Again, this is looking at the bigger picture of our village. Where do we want to be? How do we want to address our land use? How do we want to look at our built environment as we begin to move forward? Again, this is something we want to do in line with the vision board and make sure that we have the right people in place. My recommendation is to create a position and hire a new BZP director, and that person would be a planner. Many reasons I request that. One, I believe we need a strong planner on staff. Number two, that will free up Jake from having to do double duty and put him focused back in public works. And thirdly, it'll allow Renee to focus on his building official job completely and totally with the technical skills that he brings to the table. So I think that's a very important position for three reasons. To get there, my recommendation is to eliminate one of our positions, our special projects coordinator, who in the past has served as our flood plan manager. So what we would like to do is make our resilience coordinator into a certified floodplain manager. And that is a school we can send her to and get her trained up. We also happen to have Olga on staff, who's also a CFM. And one of the criteria that I will ask when we hire the planner is that individual is also CFM qualified to make sure that we have floodplain management capability across the staff. Cost of that is $207,000. Offset is $116,000. That's 66, as I mentioned before, the special projects coordinator, eliminating that position. And an estimated, and I'll tell you this is a low estimate because I could believe it could be much, much more, of $50,000 reduction in payments to planning consultants if we actually have a planner on staff. The last one is village appearance and functionality. Besides the capital improvements and grant manager, I believe one of the other most important positions that I am looking for is the public works superintendent. What this does is gives us the ability to look at public works from both the short-term operations and maintenance capability, and that would be the responsibility of the superintendent. And the other part of public works, which will be looking at the midterm, long-term, trying to position this village so that we can address our long-term infrastructure issues. The superintendent would take on fleet management, would take on facilities management, and also oversee our operations and maintenance every day on our landscaping and our streetscaping. Next one is to create the position for the maintenance labor. Even though we have the individual on staff, we have to create that position for next year. Total cost for this is $176,000. Our estimated offset is $171,000. To get there, we will move $21,000 from the chief building inspector's salary so that he can focus completely and totally on building inspecting and remove that facility management position or duty that he's had over the last year. That'll be transferred over to the superintendent. And then we have an estimate of $150,000 to improve contract oversight. That'll be one of the jobs from the superintendent, as well as reducing the operations and maintenance contract requirements. Again, getting more boots on the ground to do the maintenance, landscaping, and streetscaping that we're looking for in Key Biscayne. I have there a big $ TBD because we don't know what it means yet when we centralize facility and fleet management under the superintendent. But those are two contracts I definitely want to look at to make sure we're doing it the most effectively and efficiently. So the next slide is a roll-up.
May I have a little question?
Yes, sir.
On that slide. Just on all these charts up to this one, if it's okay, the cost, and then you have the offset, just for formatting, wouldn't it be better to have a net number if you were a citizen? In other words, if you're going to spend $150,000 quote in new things, help me if I'm wrong, and you have an offset of 120, then the net impact is 30,000.
That's the next slide.
Yeah, so we could do that individually, or what I've done on the next slide is a roll-up of the entire.
Right. I just saying again, since these are public documents, if I'm a citizen, it'd be nice to see also, net.
We could do that.
It's a thought about it's excellent presentation.
We can definitely do that.
Okay.
So this is really, I think, where the conversation gets exciting. So what we've done is I've rolled up everything I've just told you from first priority all the way down to what I call my fifth priority. And I did this on purpose so that you understand what I believe is the most important positions we're looking for. You can see what we're doing in terms of the action, what that expense is, and then what the offset is. And then let me be clear, that offset is both the actual and the estimated. I do have a breakdown here that if you do have a further question, then I can tell you the difference between the two. But what I'm calculating right there is a estimated as well as a direct offset. So if you come down to the bottom, you can see the difference. We're asking for $1,249,000 increase and $1,108,000 offset.
Upset is synonymous with savings, is it not?
We have $193,000.
No, I'm saying for purposes of communication.
Yeah, but I want to be very careful about using the word savings because 193 of them are direct savings.
Okay.
915,000 are estimated savings, and those aren't real savings until we realize those savings.
Okay. Councilmember Cigarrola? And Pete, could you please put us on speaker mode so everybody outside can see who's speaking?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Oh, you're better.
Mr. Manager, I have a couple questions. Actually, if we can go back, there was a couple of slides. The last one and the one before, you had as part of offsets certain calculations and value. And I just had a question. How was it you came to those numbers? Because I'm not exactly sure. Let me see if I can go to mine. Like, for example, in the village appearance and functionality, in one of the offsets, you put estimated 150,000 by improving contract oversight and reducing ops and maintenance. How was it you came to that number?
Again, it's an estimate, council member. It's just taking into account how many contracts that we believe that Public Works Superintendent would be overseeing, and that would be the contract oversight reduction. And then how many and how much that maintenance labor would reduce our operations and maintenance contractor to do. So once we bring someone in-house, that means our contractor has to do less. So it's a combination of both. Contract oversight, are they doing what they should be doing, and how are we holding them accountable? And number two, the maintenance labor is actually replacing some of the work they're doing for us.
At a lower rate, at a lower in-house rate.
At an in-house rate.
Okay, and the slide before that, for example, also resilient and sustainable infrastructure. Your last offset is $75,000 savings in project management costs. Is that a similar, I guess, process?
It is, and I made very clear that these are estimated, and this is something we need to confirm and obviously become much better projections on it. Again, the opportunity and the need to oversee these projects instead of, a lot of times we will outsource project management to a consultant. And then we pay something like a CEI, or we pay something a project management cost that in some cases we could do in-house.
Will there be, I guess, more concrete numbers in September once we revisit this? Or is this something we have to go through at least 1 year of experience to figure out if there's actually savings or not?
I will say a combination of both. We'll get a better estimate, but it will take 1 year to see if those estimates are in fact. But we will use these as KPIs. We will use these as measures that we will track throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
London, and then Councilmember, that was the only person who raised their hand thus far. Councilmember London, or Vice Mayor, you're recognized. You are literally muted this time. Literally, you got to unmute yourself. I'm not making a joke.
Says I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Okay. Steve,
go ahead.
Anytime you want to bring in people to do maintenance, and Ignacio said to you, we're going to lower the cost, and you basically were and you just said in-house, because I don't think you believe that's going to lower cost. Our in-house cost of low cost labor, such as maintenance people, is so high that it really makes no economic sense to have anybody on staff when we can contract out with people to do that work. Now, as far as the supervision of those people, that's great. But to bring in more people to do things which we don't do efficiently, I'm completely against. You're also making the assumption with all these things you're doing that everybody now is fully gainfully employed, that all departments are efficient, and therefore all we have to do is add people and services, etc. And I don't think you've been here long enough to make that determination. So I really think before you add lots more people, we ought to find out exactly where we are and where we're coming from. The next thing, oh, that's enough.
Certainly. Councilmember Segurola, go ahead.
Weren't we in a process, or weren't we going to do an audit of our operations to determine if people were fully utilized or employed? Wasn't that something that we've discussed recently? And if we're going to figure out if these numbers are real or not in terms of offsetting costs, wouldn't we need to do that as soon as possible, to do an audit of our operations?
And we do, and that is one of our goals for the summertime, is do a manpower assessment.
Is there enough time?
We'll see how quickly we can turn. I mean, we've got to move it pretty quickly. We are in the middle of, close to the middle of July.
2 months from today until our first budget hearing. So I think that'll weigh in when we get back together in September for this. That'll be part of it.
Ed's point about laborers is a third priority item that has a $55,000 cost to it. I think that was the only implication from his observation.
Oh. No, and I like to address Councilman London's question. I think, no, you're right. And I'm not looking at bringing in a a whole slew of laborers. This gentleman is already on staff. We pay him $42,000 a year, not a lot of money. And he's really an insurance policy. He's our flexibility to get out and do things that need to be done now. I'm not looking at replacing any contractor because I agree with you wholeheartedly that a contractor can come in and do the maintenance of this village wholesale much better than we can. But having one person flexible to address the needs that we have immediately, I think is a valuable tool.
I agree. One person and no problem.
Councilmember Laredo?
Ed, I share your concerns as Aguirolas, but I think we need to remind ourselves the content of this meeting is to set a 30,000-foot picture of where we're going. And clearly you will agree that we have not, let's say, supervised or maximized our return on those things that we have outsourced. So I think one of the things that is not being said, but it is being said in between the line, is to look at contracts hard to make sure we get, we are, from our contacts outside of the village, in the world of consultants, we've been known as easy pickings because of that. So I think we should applaud the direction in which we're moving, which is close to scrutiny and not use it as necessarily as a measuring or a naivete on the part of the manager or us.
Well, Councilman, I think there is that fine balance, and I think we're going to have to find that fine balance between contract oversight and the right number of people we need to do contract oversight versus folks that do stuff. And I think, are we going to get it exactly right the first year? I don't think we will. Are we going to have to tweak it over time? Yes. But we are. I mean, we are leaving money on the table in our contract negotiations. We are leaving money on the table on how contractors either do or do not fulfill the deliverables and services we're asking. We need someone to oversee what they're doing and to ensure that they are fulfilling their contract obligations. We can do stuff ourselves. I don't want to do too much because I agree with many of you who are speaking. I think in many cases, contractors can do it better, more efficiently. They can only do it better and more efficiently if they have proper oversight. So I want to find that proper balance.
And that proper balance, Mr. Manager, it's a message will go out quicker that there's a new sheriff in town and there is a new criteria. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. I mean, the very mere pressure on supervision, legitimate, will set down the message, since the whole network, that there were no longer easy pickings. And that will turn into dollars and cents. So I think that's good that you have it as a goal.
And I appreciate you. What you brought in here tonight is it's impressive. I like the ideas, and I appreciate your ideas on this and how frankly how short a time it's taken you to get to this point. I mean, there's a lot here, and you've been in what, 2 months, month and a half. So
remember, there was a 6-month hiring process.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't bring it up because then this one gets all fired up. So, but anyway, I think this is impressive. Exactly. We got free work out of you, Ed. We got free work out of the manager. You should be thrilled.
Look at that. You got a year and a half out of me, Councilman London, for a year's worth of pay.
Yeah. So, all right. Any other questions or comments at this point, or should we move on to the 5-year capital? Or I'm sorry, did I skip something? Operating budget driving. Sorry. Go ahead.
So again, to make sure we stay at high levels, what I like to have Benjamin do is go over our operating budget and the cost drivers, the 4 categories of cost drivers that make up our budget.
Okay, so here we wanted to just focus on cost drivers, as Councilmember Laredo mentioned, bird's eye 30,000-foot view. In the personnel, if we compare our fiscal year 21 to the fiscal year 22 proposed budget, there's a difference of $2.2 million, which is 11.5% difference. But I want to make sure we understand the difference, which makes up that $2.2 million. So as the manager just mentioned, these new positions that are proposed make up about $1.249 million. The rest of that is from the existing positions. And the reason the existing positions increased by about half that amount is from a couple of factors. First, Within our labor contracts, they call for a COLA adjustment. We use the Bureau of Labor Statistics South Florida figure April over April, and the cost of living adjustment, or the CPI, was 4.1%. We have a ceiling of 4%, so all the employees will receive a 4% COLA come October 1st. Additionally, our labor contracts call for a step plan in public safety with a 5% increase into your pay if you have not maxed out your step position. Additionally, into this personnel figure are insurance benefits. So we're talking both health insurance, life insurance as part of your benefits package. And for purposes of this presentation, we budgeted a double-digit increase for those benefits. Although we're confident as an administration, we're going to be able to negotiate these further down in preparation of the September final budget numbers. We'll get to the next line is debt service. We went over this in detail earlier with the $1.26 million reduction in expenditures for a 38% decrease. The next line is professional and contract services. The difference is about a $500,000 increase from the prior year. And diving deeper, about $300,000 of this increase is for program providers in the community center. If you remember this time last year, we weren't sure if we were going to be back open in the community center. So we budgeted a decrease in program providers. There is a flip side offsetting revenue account to this because we have a profit sharing agreement with those service providers in the community center. So last year we budgeted a reduction in revenue, but also a reduction in expenditures. This is now bringing us back to those fiscal year, 19 levels. And that's the majority of this increase. The last line is everything that didn't fit in the first three. So the other operating expenditures only had a 2% increase. And this is something that the manager, myself, the department directors will go into further detail over the summer, trying to whittle down any excess expenditure that we notice in terms of rising costs. The other thing I'd like to, the final column there is a percentage of our total budget. And I wanted to kind of see where we compare to other municipalities. So our personnel costs at roughly 60% of our total operating budget is actually below other neighboring cities. So if we look at a city of Miami or city of Miami Beach, they're teetering between 70-75% of their total operating budget. So I think the village has done a great job while we prioritize bringing these contracts in-house. You'd expect your personnel costs to go up, but we've done a good job in maintaining that number at around 60%, which is actually lower than some of the other benchmarked cities. Any questions on this slide? All right, Pete, go to the next slide.
Okay, as Jake comes up to the podium to talk through our specific details on our year one of our capital plan, I just want to have you look through the 6 steps of how I see a capital plan being built. Pretty straightforward, but I think it's important that you follow this in a very, very detailed process. Knowing what you want to do, compiling it into a 20-year plan, aligning it with your strategic categories and priorities, having a very specific prioritization process to decide what's important, phase it across the years, and that's based on funding, staffing, and processing. Many times it's procurement, and at the end, developing a successive set of 5-year capital plans to execute to achieve our goals. So that's the philosophy I want to follow in terms of developing our capital plan. And in the meantime, I'll have Jake present our FY22 year one of our 5-year capital plan.
Okay. For the fiscal year 22, our total year one for the next 5-year CIP adds up approximately $6.5 million. Broken down to, but there are 7 categories: GF for the general funds, GOB, special revenue, transfer from other funds. We have ARP monies allocated there, and we have some grants monies available. So $6.5 million consists of $1.5 million approximately from general funds. You have about $500,000 transfer from CITT, $4.14 million from ARP fund, and $400,000 from grant. So I'll go one by one and explain each CIP line item, and I'll answer some of the questions that you may have. And also, these projects are classified into three major title, which is in line with our last strategic plan, which consists of public safety, resiliency, and quality of life. And quality of life is broken down to transportation, beautification, facilities, as well as parks and open spaces. And the first line item that you will see is the fleet, $300,000. That is a general fund that's set up for overall village-wide fleet, which provides vehicles and equipment for fire department, police department, public works, parks, etc. And there are a number of cars that will be replaced next year under the fleet budget, mostly for police, I believe, and there may be, I don't think anything is on the fire, but there's a public works truck in there. Moving forward to resiliency, utility undergrounding, we budgeted two line items there. One is FPL, AT&T, Comcast design fee. That's if the council wishes to move forward with utility undergrounding. Those are the fees that we're going to have to pay to utility providers for design, Florida Power and Light, AT&T, and Comcast. The second line item under utility underground phase one is $290,000 for bond program and implementation. Program manager, project manager, construction manager line item. Again, if we were to pull the bond next year and move forward with the project, this is a line item they're going to draw from paying professional services to run this program and help us. Next line item is stormwater infrastructure improvements. You will see $3 million in green color under the ARP. So we are qualified to use ARP funding on the stormwater projects. And that's once we move forward with the stormwater project, we plan on spending $3 million next fiscal year under ARP money. The following line item is shoreline protection, beach nourishment, and dune restoration. Phase one, $100,000. This is a requirement from Florida Department of Environmental Protection for the last beach nourishment seagrass monitoring project. So this is, again, for the permit requirement, we have to do it because it's a permit requirement and there's no other way of getting out of there. Quality of life, transportation. This is Crandon Boulevard Bike and Pedestrian Improvements project. This was presented to council a couple of times by the coordinating group. The first one was about 3 years ago, and then I had to get a refresher done just before COVID. I just want to go over and list the details of this program and what project it includes, because I don't want to have a confusion that this is only green bike lanes. It's not green bike lanes. So it does include reorganization of regulatory signage. As you know, we have a signage pollution in Crandon. There are so many signs that needs to be realigned. It will include reposition of rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Again, we have one too many of them and they need to be readjusted and repositioned. It also reconsiders marked crosswalks that are less than 600 feet in proximity. It includes elimination of crosswalks at certain locations. It includes increased pedestrian head start and crossing times in our existing signals, so additional programming required. This project will provide. Analysis of the complete pedestrian phasing on traffic signals. Installation of pedestrian countdown signals where it currently does not exist. Shortening pedestrian walking distances and curb extensions, lighting improvements, and as well as green bike lanes on conflict points only. So that's that project. So it's very inclusive of number of elements in there. Now, we are budgeting $500,000 for transfer from CITT fund. We are qualified to receive $300,000 under ARP, and we also have $100,000 from funds from state of Florida. Moving forward, quality of life facilities, community center roof replacement. We have existing issues. The community center roof, it's overdue for some repairs and replacements. And we will be doing a repair there for $200,000, again, qualified under ARP fund. Community center RTU, rooftop unit replacement is an air conditioning system for the community center. Again, $38,000. We are asking the budget on the general funds. And one more line item in the community center is the community center spin bike replacement. These are the spin room bikes that overdue for replacement. Moving on to quality of life, parks and open spaces, 530 Crandon Park construction. Fiscal year 22, we will be receiving $200,000. We'll be booking that receivable from grant money for the 530 Crandon project. Beach park improvements, we are budgeting $66,000 from general funds and $583,000 from ARP money to improve beach park. As you know, the beach park is in pretty bad condition, structure, as well as the park itself. And it requires a immediate redesign and repair and construction. So they'll be happening fiscal year 22. Beach park sewer extension, $50,000. That's extending the public sewer so that beach park can be legally fronted by a sewer and they can connect to it. They're currently on septic, and design plans are done in-house. We have agreements signed with Miami-Dade County Water and Sewer, and we'll be doing the construction in next 2 months. And probably by fall, Beach Club can connect to it. Moving on, Lake Park improvements construction. This project includes reconstruction of the Lake Park gazebo, which is in pretty bad condition. Approximate cost is $66,000. Again, $16,000 of this we paid under ARP money, and $50,000 is we have grants available. So it's majority of this project will be grant covered. Hampton Park improvements, we have $50,000 available for Hampton Park to make further improvements to the recently acquired land. Moving on, Village Hall Courtyard landscape and hardscape improvements. That's basically in our close quarters right here to make streetscape and landscape improvements. We are asking to budget $50,000 on the general funds. St. Agnes lighting replacement and LED retrofit. This is for the area that we lease and we use. That's $240,000 reconstruction cost that we are asking the budget. Splash pad replacement, again, it's overdue and in dire need of repair, $150,000. Following line item is Caluso Park tennis court surfacing. That's a windscreen replacement. Again, that's a heavily used tennis court that requires repair. We are asking to budget $28,000. And finally, we are asking $60,000 for the Village Green interior sidewalk running pad renovation. Again, all these projects are divided into about 6 different funds, and they total up to $6.5 million. However, the only portion that affects the village directly is about $1.5 million.
Councilmember Wallace.
Yeah, thank you. I have a few questions. When will we see years 2 through 5? Will that be something that you'll send out to us before we get into September?
I don't know who's the question, Mr. Manager.
Yeah, so if it's coming to me, yeah, that we will. That's something that's late July is one of my big priorities to get this capital plan underway, or the plan itself. If you would like to have it in advance, we'll be happy to share it with you if you want to give us some feedback. But of course, come September will be our official submission. So we'll be happy to give it to you. Let's shoot for mid-August, if that's fair.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's good just to review that beforehand, so we're not doing it up there. Another question I had is the $300,000 for the fleet. That is what we're going to be spending this year. One of the questions I have, and I've asked this question over a couple of years, is our policy right now. I believe most of the vehicles are 7 years replacement. And I think that, the way technology is moving, maybe 7 years might have been okay 10 or 15 years ago. I think a lot of these cars are built much better now. Should we be moving that to 8 years or 9 years? I don't know if anybody's done a little bit of research on whether that should move a little bit. And my question is, if that policy did move, let's say, to 8 years, would that $300,000 lower down a bit?
Benjamin, if you'd answer that, please.
Sure, I'll take this one. So to answer your first question about the policy. So in 2019, we adopted by resolution our fleet renewal replacement policy. And we came up with those recommendations based on best practices within the industry. So while, our individual consumer vehicle, yes, obviously could go past, 7 years, it could go 10, 15 years, because a police officer's vehicle is used much differently. It's not easy to compare, the two, but we're open to looking, and if things change based on technology, or even introducing electric vehicles which have a different useful life, we're obviously always open and examining what makes the most fiscal sense for the village. In terms of if we were to change, would it change $300,000? I'd say for the first year, unfortunately not. And this is because for many years, it looks like the replacement policy was neglected. So currently in our inventory, we have many cars that are well past the 7 years or $100,000 mile thresholds. So we really need to proactively replace them to get them back on this cycle. One of the benefits of getting back on this cycle is you got to find a happy medium between spending, obviously taxpayer dollars to address the fleet needs, but also if you take them too long, then the salvage value of them is much lower as well. So we got to hit a sweet spot where they're operational. We're not incurring tremendous, costs for new transmissions and heavy maintenance, but also where there's enough money left as a salvage value, which we put back into that $300,000, which then releases funds to be used for future vehicles. So we're open to looking at both, extending that useful life. I just don't think there's going to be savings right away until we really get on that, until we're fully adhering to that policy.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question, and that's something that I spoke to our manager about. I think that we should look at this as a council, is that the green paint on the on Crandon for the bike lanes, I see that the price went up tremendously, and I believe that was because of a material change and a specification. And Steve and I spoke, and he's very familiar with what they did in Coconut Grove, and I drove past it and saw it. And they basically only painted portions where they really needed to be, which would reduce costs. And I think that's something that we all should look at, possibly by the time we get the budget, that maybe we make an adjustment to the project.
And I think, and I'll let Jake follow on that one. And if you did hear him speak, he mentioned the items of the project. And one of the things I did ask him to do based on your and my conversation is make sure that we are only painting green paint at the conflict points, similar to what's done on Bird Avenue. I think the road you and I are talking about.
Yes, thank you.
Any other comments here? Vice Mayor?
Benjamin, you said that police cars are different than other cars, and I agree with you, except in Key Biscayne. Because of our small community geographically, most of the driving is done by our police cars, which is the majority of our cars, is driving the police officers home and back to work. So probably 8 times to 9 times the mileage is going back and forth versus patrolling Key Biscayne. Therefore, I don't think you can compare our police car usage with other other municipalities or governments. And therefore, we probably, as Brett was saying, but we probably can keep them much longer. And I think you should look at that.
So to answer the council member's point and keeping them much longer, we have done that. I don't know if it was a conscious decision to neglect the renewal replacement policy, but what we've been finding is on the flip side, our operational costs have gone up. I think the prior police chief, the current police chief could probably speak to it. I definitely see it in finance, that we're incurring tremendous maintenance costs on those vehicles. So we'll still examine it. We'll look at it. We'll try to develop that sweet spot that works for Key Biscayne, because as the councilman mentioned, our use is unique and not exactly comparable to other departments.
The other thing is we have an agreement now with the city of Miami Beach to maintain our cars. To me, I can't believe Miami Beach is that much more efficient than we are, and we can't be considered efficient compared to the private sector. So I'm sure the manager is going to be looking at maintenance and management of the vehicles and other possible places, which should save a lot of money, not cost us money.
So you hit the nail on the head in the manager's prior slide when he discussed accountability and enforcement. He had an estimated cost on improved contract management. That's exactly one of those contracts that we want to examine and make sure we're getting the best value for the village.
Thank you.
Any other comments right now, or can we move on? All right, let's move on.
All right. So, although it's doesn't directly correlate to the millage rate, which is a discussion of this budget workshop, I did want to mention our other funds besides the general fund. We have 2 special revenue funds and 2 enterprise funds that make up all of our village funds. So, the first special revenue fund is the transportation fund. And the revenue sources are local option sales tax and secondly, the transportation surtax from the CITT, which is that half percent sales tax. Expenses related to this fund, primarily we use about, I'd say 80% of this fund to fund the freebie services. And the manager already mentioned possibly increasing the scope of the freebie services because it's been so tremendously popular. Additionally, the fund funds debt service for the phase 2 and phase 3 Crandon Boulevard projects. Our other special revenue fund is the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Land Trust. One of the council members mentioned land acquisition being a priority, and this fund receives 1% of the total ad valorem dollars as a transfer from the general fund each year. I'm just noticing a typo here. The end of year fiscal year 21 budget is actually about $3.8 million. It increased by about $260,000, which is 1% of our fiscal year 21 ad valorem revenue. I'm anticipating for fiscal year 22 another $260,000. This will obviously, of course, be variable and depend on where we finally land with the final millage rate. But more or less, I think we'll be above. It's safe to say we'll be above $4 million at the end of fiscal year 22. If you remember going a couple of years back, this fund was closer to $8 million, and we targeted the 2 Harbor Park properties and spent $2 million each on those. So projected to be above $4 million. The 2 enterprise funds are the stormwater and the solid waste funds. The main revenue source of stormwater is from our utility ERU, our equivalent residential unit utility fee. And the expenses of the fund are the operations and maintenance of the stormwater system and debt service on our 2013 improvements. Just a note on this, we're working right now with the property appraiser's office. You all approved an ordinance to transition the collection of the stormwater fee from Miami County Water and Sewer Department to the property appraiser's department. And we believe our collection rate will be improved and also the timing of receiving these funds. Since we're talking about a stormwater master plan and bonding out this revenue, we'll be able to collect our revenue at the beginning of the fiscal year, which will put us in a stronger position to then borrow. The Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, the revenue source is the fee on single family and duplex properties that receive solid waste and recycling services. We recently renegotiated a contract to bring in a new vendor to provide this service. And once again, we've made the move for this new fiscal year for the billing to be done by the Miami-Dade County Property Appraiser. This was originally done in-house in the finance department, and there's just much more efficiencies, and we expect a better collection rate by making this change.
Just wonder,
Councilmember Laredo?
I know that we have a balance between we have this stuff and we have read it and we have gone through it, and I know you have an obligation to expose it to the public as well, but I hope you don't. I see the next few things are sort of initiatives, what I would call soft things, and I don't want to get too tired until we get to the hard thing, which usually happens here. So I don't know if we can move this along a little faster so we can get to the millage and see a little bit of redundancy in the next few.
Well, but I mean, okay. I understand your point, but I feel like, do you
go through it?
Go through it. The public has. This is more for the, I think these things are for the public so that we can keep them informed and they understand where we're coming from and specifically where the manager's coming from.
Just a thought question. This is not a point of advocacy, but the American Rescue Plan money is substantially, if not altogether, allocated towards stormwater improvements. If a portion in the coming year was allocated toward the Land Trust Fund, for example, or land acquisition opportunity if one presented, that could make sense considering cost negotiation and the more maybe predictable cost of the stormwater improvements that are projected for next year. It's a thought.
Oh, and what we can do is, obviously that's the first initiative. So it's why don't we walk through what's eligible, and then we can have that discussion. And I think that's something we'd have to get a read on to see if it's eligible. And I think if it has to do, and it does support stormwater, then I think the answer is yes. So, but let's jump into it. I'll go over real quickly on what I see as what is the eligible items for the American Recovery Plan Act. And I will, and in the consideration of time, Councilman Laredo, try to go through this at the top level. Next slide. So what we have here is 7 or 8 different efficiencies that we think we can do to address both the revenue side as well as the expense side to really tackle the budget from both ends. But before I start there, I do want to jump into the American Rescue Plan. I think it's important for us to know. Next slide, please, Pete. We are, as a village, receiving $5.4 million, which is a great amount of money for us. 2.7 we should be receiving somewhere between now and the end of September. And then in 2021, we'll be receiving another additional $2.7 million. Just by rules, these must be encumbered by 2024 and must be completely spent by 2026. Eligible use, and I have a TBD there because as we speak, they seem to change or confusion gets resolved over time. But as we understand it right now, step 1 is we can cover the loss of revenues as a result of the pandemic. And those revenues that we've lost, as Benjamin mentioned before, in the community center, as well as the building zoning and permit fees. As a result of that, any lost revenue payments may fund what they are calling pay-go projects. I'm imagining there's something that they called in the past like shovel ready, but the idea is it's something that you have ready to go relatively quickly. And they're really focused on projects that were not executed in fiscal year 20 or 21, budgeted, but not executed in fiscal year 2021. So which is why we looked at putting the money against the Crandon Boulevard Traffic and Pedestrian Flow and Safety Plan, the community center roof replacement, and the lake and beach park improvements. And the next category is investing in the new infrastructure projects. Infrastructure that is available that really fits to the village of Key Biscayne is stormwater, sewer infrastructure, and broadband capability. There are other possibilities, transportation, but you have to be a transit organization. There are a couple other possibilities for infrastructure, but again, the 3 that apply to us as we read it right now: stormwater, sewer infrastructure, and broadband. So stormwater infrastructure improvements, and you saw that against the money in that project on the capital plan. The sewer connection to Beach Club. We are still reviewing what, if necessary, whether we can and need to invest in broadband improvements. And I guess a read, and we can talk to the lawyer about, or the attorney about this, is whether the purchase of land could be considered an improvement in infrastructure to support the overall infrastructure program. So that's something I'll work with Chad on.
And I think that to Kaplan's, I support you in where you're going. Legislation is like, what do they call it, sausage making, and regulation is even worse. And that is where the value added we'll find is whether our people in DC are doing the work for us. Because a lot of they are really handling massive amount of stuff. And if you come with the right definition, it's significant for us. So I would put that as a priority as you talk to our, not only Chad, but our consultants.
And Jim Davenport and I are talking on probably a weekly basis and trying to get a better understanding of how that all flows. It's almost moving. I hate to say this, or maybe I like to say this. It's almost moving to where they're having really no restrictions. All the restrictions and the categories seem to be melding together. But once we get the money and once we get the final directions, we'll definitely come back to the council with what our plan is going forward.
But Steve, what I wanted to also just tell you more pointedly, when you go up to Washington or Higo said, you go with your definition and let them beat you back. Don't ask for them to define it, because then they will get lost. It's a small but very significant. You come with that authority, that conviction, and they say, "Oh, you're right," rather than the other way around.
Got it. So one of the things I wanted to highlight at the bottom of this page, and I think it's important. In the past, we've done a lot of support of our businesses across the village with some of the money that we've received from the federal government. I did want to highlight this, and we're going to address this with the Chamber of Commerce. There is a program under the Small Business Administration, which is called the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And I think we have a number of restaurants who probably qualify for that, and we'll make sure that we share that with Tatiana at the Chamber of Commerce.
And it was ended today. If you saw the news, they closed this program down today. The SBA restaurant program. It's on the report from our Washington people. I might have misread it, but I urge you, I was going to call you to tell you, or I was going to tell the chamber.
Next slide. I don't want to go into the gory details of what a workforce assessment is. You guys can read this. But generally speaking, as we mentioned before, we need to find out, are we structured properly? Do we have the right skills in the right place? Are they working back and forth? Do we have the right positions, the right qualifications, et cetera? And also a part of this is also applying our latest compensation and qualification study. So again, mentioning what we talked about before, making sure that we have the right people in the right place, right skills, doing the right thing. Next slide. We've talked about this a number of times, but again, this is where we capture it all in one single slide. The importance of really centralize some of our programs. There's no reason in a village of 150 to 180 people that we have very similar functions being done by 5 or 6 different people. So one of our goals is to consolidate, centralize these 5 management programs that we think can be done much more effectively, better economies of scale, less redundancies, and better oversight. Next slide. And Benjamin, if you'd like to run over your suggestion and recommendation on how we want to implement our debt policy.
Sure. So at the top there, just as a reminder, we have our debt ordinance, which states the total principal of the village's debt shall be limited to, the keyword being the greater of 1% of the total assessed value of all property within the village, or the amount which would require the annual principal and interest payments on debt during any fiscal year to exceed 15% of the general fund expenditures. Just to put this in perspective, our 1% of our assessed value would still be around $82 million because it was such a slight increase this year. And our current debt service of $2 million is about 5% of our total general fund expenditures. In terms of the policy, I want to highlight that we're really trying to strive towards these longer term infrastructure projects. In the past, we had many smaller issuances for equipment needs or software, and it really would make sense because we have such a restrictive debt policy. We compare it to other municipalities with that 1%, that we really move forward. And if we're going to issue debt, we really got to look to the long term. So we're talking infrastructure projects with 30-year useful life and beyond. So we can really take advantage of great interest rates and not fill our restrictive debt capacity with smaller issuances. So the flip side of that is we have to plan better. We have to plan better in our capital improvement budget for the vehicles, for software needs, for equipment, so that we're not issuing debt and it doesn't come as a surprise when these things are needed. Because otherwise you could get yourself caught in this revolving door of debt where it doesn't make sense to issue at 5 or 10 years when you really want to focus on your longer term infrastructure projects. Within the policy, the village is not going to use long-term debt for the current operations, and we're going to maintain good communication with our bond rating agencies regarding financial condition. The village is going to strive to maintain or improve on its bond rating, and will allow a policy of full disclosure on every financial report and borrowing prospectus. Should some of these large infrastructure projects get approved, we'll obviously come in and discuss when we're wanting to issue debt, also the cost of issuance. We've done a great job in-house on bringing these costs down. We've renegotiated with our financial advisors, and we're striving to keep these costs below. When you add in the legal costs, the financial advisor costs, all the underwriter costs, we're targeting to keep these costs under 1%. So that's where we'd like to be. And obviously, we'll give all the details at each borrowing in full disclosure. The next slide. Besides looking at reduction in expenditures, and I mentioned this, thinking outside the box for potential revenue sources. We want to restructure and recoup building, zoning, and fire inspection fees. And this is really about analyzing the costs it takes to provide these services and ensuring that we have enough in revenue to offset those costs. This really struck us during the pandemic when we were closed for a few months. We still had these fixed operating costs, but we had nothing on the revenue side. So we need to adjust our building fee permit schedule to ensure that we have safeguards against these incidents that could happen, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's a hurricane, et cetera. We want to make sure that we have substantial reserves that we'll be able to draw on should the need arise. The second one is to align and increase service fees to the consumer price index. So this really hit home this year when we noticed on the expenditure side, our labor costs were tied to CPI. On the flip side, a lot of our service fees have been the same for 5, 10, or some in 15 years when I started analyzing these. So we have to look on the revenue side about tying these to the CPI as well. I'd like to bring forward a resolution at another time where we can tie it. The mechanics of how we do this is not so important as the fact that we do it. So that a decision is made and every year we tie it to CPI. We could round up to make sure they're in round numbers, but we have to look at ourselves and notice that the cost of providing these services, whether in the community center, whether they're registration fees, that we're looking at what it actually costs to provide those. We touched on this one, improve the collections on solid waste and stormwater fees, which we're already doing. And the fourth one is timely reporting of building permit activity to Miami-Dade County property appraiser. We want to ensure that the building department, which is collecting information on permitting for new construction, we want to make sure the property appraiser has the same access to that information so they can include that in our appraised values come June 1 and July 1 to make sure that those values are going up and properly reflect the sales data and also the new construction that's happening in the key. So those four are kind of our short-term lookout for potential revenue sources. Then we get to our midterm. We'd like for project funding structure. And what this means is we do these CIP projects to allocate a portion of the projects to fund costs associated with them, whether they be people or contract professionals, to create a tree trust fund, and also to maximize franchise fees, specifically with commercial solid waste. We have a new solid waste and recycling vendor who's done an admirable job so far. We think that by franchising the fees and bringing some of the commercial buildings into our contract, not only will they get better pricing, but it will reduce our economic footprint by having less trucks on the village, and also reduce traffic by decreasing the amount of trucks on the village. And then in the long term, we'd like to explore establishing impact fees to the parks, the road, the beach, police, fire and rescue, and stormwater, et cetera.
I have a question on this. First of all, for clarification for the public, this is revenue sources. So
potential revenue sources.
Potential. So that when you see tree trust fund, don't react that it's another expense. It's another possible source of funds. Mm-hmm. And it's important to clarify it. And if you have a one call to make, Mr. Manager, it's to the mayor, who's a strong mayor in Doral, because they have just really done extremely well in this area, both in beautification of their city and also making it a revenue source. And the last one, established impact fees, is that the same as my advocacy for concurrency fees? Okay.
Doral is a good example.
Excellent example.
Slide.
And very accessible people, the mayor and...
Yeah, and I know him well, so good opportunity to talk to him.
All right, so moving along, I'd like to discuss other people's money. So obviously, before we use village funds, we're exploring any other, whether it's these potential revenue sources that I brought up earlier, or pursuing other people's money rather than taxpayer dollars. The first one the manager touched on, which was the American Rescue Plan Act, that ARPA. It's going to bring about $5.4 million. We're also following other bills that are going around this federal administration too. I know they got 2 tax bills in the works right now that could increase infrastructure spending, and we are following with our lobbyists in DC as well to make sure that funding is allocated to the village. In terms of pursuing grants, we want to really strategize and outward look to the future to not just be reactive within grants, but how do they tie into our long-term infrastructure plan. In terms of bonds, the timing, cost minimization, and leveraging, we mentioned by bringing in revenue more timely and earlier, we'll be able to have a stronger pledge towards the stormwater bond. In terms of reimbursements, improved justification, record keeping, and closeouts, we're expecting $2 million. Reimbursement from FEMA for some of the beach renourishment projects that our Chief Resiliency Office spearheaded the last few months. We still have $400,000 outstanding in COVID reimbursements from FEMA. And additionally, we're pursuing a grant from the Land Trust for $1.4 million from the Florida Community Trust that would help offset the cost of those 2 Harbor Park acquisitions. And the last one is direct appropriations. We want to align this legislative agenda with our strategic goals and be very strategic in our asks. The state has $50,000 for sargassum removal, and from the federal administration, about $500,000 allocated to Key Biscayne for K8 stormwater improvements. On the flip side of revenue, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to work, the manager, myself, the department directors, on reducing our expenditures. That includes reevaluating and renegotiating professional contractual service agreements. We've already done a fair bit of this so far, but we'd like to keep the ball rolling, renegotiate with our benefit providers for health insurance, professional liability, workers' comp, reduce overtime with better duty assignments. This has to go within our staffing and workforce analysis to see how to better staff for what the village wants to obtain. We're going to reevaluate the vehicle and facility maintenance contracts. We do agree that might not have made the most fiscal sense to use the City of Miami Beach. So we're going to reevaluate that. As the manager mentioned, a 1-year moratorium on non-mission essential IC system purchases. And we really have to be strategic when we add these new softwares. If they're not integrated with each other, we're really losing a grand opportunity to tie them in. So we made the decision to purchase an ERP module. And for every new software that comes on, we're going to demand that there's integration with that system. We're going to review all of our subscriptions and memberships to make sure we're not overpaying for anything, and implement an administrative debt policy and enforce a thorough mid-year budget review and budget controls, where the manager will have to have better line item control on our budget. The manager and myself will be reviewing anytime we do a budget amendment from one line item to another to keep the integrity of our budget intact. Next slide, please.
So with all that we've presented you this evening, we've got a roll up here on the right of what our proposed budget and expenses look like for next year. And at this point, we are proposing to increase our millage cap from last year of 3.2022 to 3.3267, a percent difference of 3.89%.
Okay. Comments on anything that went before this, before we get into the fun about the millage cap? Go, Councilmember McCormick.
Where you talked about
see you, Brett.
The K8 stormwater improvements. I just wanted for the public to know that is not us improving things for the school district. That is a village project that happens to use a well owned by the school district. They gave us permission to use. So that is a village project with village funds to benefit our residents on our streets.
Councilmember Moss.
Yeah, I just want to say before we get into that, thank you to our manager, our finance director, all of our directors, our employees for putting this together so quickly. I think this was, whether I agree with it or not, it was very clear. One of the most clear presentations, at least for me, during the budget. There are some items in there that are still, and I'd like to sit down and talk to the manager and the director about, including grants and debt service and where they are in the line items. But I just want to thank you guys for your hard work. And unfortunately, you set your bar, and I'm expecting it to be a lot higher when you do have a lot of time next year. So good luck.
I have a
Councilmember Laredo.
Well, I wanted to echo Moss's. This is a great beginning. It's the best beginning for me. This is my third budget. And I just want to highlight, because it's come up a couple of times, about expectations. This is not just for the manager as an individual. This is a projection of his management team that he's evaluated in putting this together. And of course, what's going to make it work is that teamwork. And also, we're part of that teamwork, that we need to support his decision. I think it's an extraordinarily solid strategic plan. It really is, even though it's supposed to be 30,000 foot look, it's very real. While it's early, it's surprisingly detailed, and it clearly has a lot of input from the bottom up of an organization, which always pleases me in all my corporate experiences. You didn't talk to consultants, you talk to the people on the line. So contrary to having that you have high goals and expectations, which is risky, I think it speaks very much about an honesty that you have in a vision. It is exactly the reverse what happens both in public sector and in even the private sector, where you set down expectations in full knowledge that they are below your achievable goals. So you can come around and say, gee, I surpassed the expectations. And by the way, you owe me a bonus. It's not common. I commend you for the work and commend you for the honesty and the fact that you're willing to take a risk. I'm on, like Moss said, it doesn't mean that we won't have disagreements on issues that we move forward, but it's the best framework I've had to get started. I really, you and your staff did a great job.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I guess I agree with everybody else. In the 8 years I've been on council, this is without a doubt the best presentation. I mean, the clearest presentation. I mean, it is expectations, it's reality, it's where we think we are, where we think we can go, where we go, and how we're going to get there. And I look at your numbers. Again, you don't have the time to look at everything in the organization to know what we can reduce. You've looked at a number of things, but overall, you're going to do your workforce analysis. You're going to do all these other things. So I think you ought to set a goal that we do not raise our millage, that we have some financial discipline. I know you're smiling, Mikey, because you always want to raise taxes. But anyway,
always, that's my goal. You didn't know that? That's my goal.
I know that, Mikey. Yeah. Anyway, and keep it the way it is. And why can't you try to achieve this within the tax rate we have now? And I don't see why you can. In fact, I know there's so much money you can save. I'm sure you can. I tried to do that when I hired you, and I'm sure now you can do it.
All right. And let me just, before we get into this annual war of words with Ed London and myself, if I could just have the attorney explain to the public that we are not establishing the ultimate millage rate tonight. This would be, but we do have to establish a cap. So any number we vote on today, this is the cap. The millage can not be raised this year above whatever number we set tonight without a unanimous vote of the council. Am I correct in that, Mr. Attorney?
First, we're not voting on anything tonight.
Correct. But
second, this is the cap that is going to be put forward in the trim notice and in the initial notices that will go out for the budget.
Okay.
So this will be your ceiling.
So that is why when I propose a number that is not 3.2022, but is 3.5, it is because I want to ensure that when we come back in September, we have not put the manager in an impossible situation. I do not anticipate. I mean, I understand he is seeking, 3.3267, and I hope, as does Ed, that he's able to reduce that even more so. But at this point, I don't want to handcuff him. And so I would propose 3.5 as the number that he would put out in the trim notice for our purposes, with the goal being to get it to no more than 3.3267, but hopefully lower than that.
Everything you say, Michael, is correct.
Thank you.
By the same token, I think if you look back, same argument you used many times, and we set the number, and we came back with it, and we never lowered it. So it's somewhat it's a function of government.
That's not true, Ed. We've done that. We've
spending other people's money that basically, hey, this is it. So why don't we stick at a number that's realistic and let him work towards it? And I'm sure he can. We'll probably do better.
Councilmember Segarola's up. No, you're muted. You're muted.
Hey, Mr. Manager, thank you very much for the work. This has been, it's a good start, I'll say. As has been said, I'm not really going to get into whether I agree with certain things or not, because the devil's in the details and there's a lot of work that's still to be done. Given that, the reality is that we've had 3 straight years of declining property values. Now, for all intents and purposes, we basically had a flat year. It looked like we were going to begin to recover, but now with the tragedy at Surfside, the reality is that 2/3 of the properties on Key Biscayne might now be pushed down in value artificially or not, given all the doubts that there are in the real estate market. For that reason, I would agree with Councilmember London. I would not want to raise the millage rate from what it is. We're already getting a little bit more in revenue. We're getting a whole lot more in grants, apparently. I think, if anything, we may be able to go down, but I would not be willing to increase it to the number you're asking, and definitely not 3.5. I think there's more than enough fat to be trimmed, and that's not even taking into account the extra money that we're expecting from all these different sources. So that's my 2 cents.
All right, and again, I'm going to reiterate this because it's going to go out that Davey wants to raise the millage to 3.5. This is for trim notice purposes only.
You said it.
I just want to be clear. Councilmember Kaplan.
I don't think we're flat. We're up. The statistics say we're up. The presentation anticipates the work over the summer to focus on expense savings opportunities, assessments, more precise assessments about the offsets, both estimated and actual. And it's predictable that there will be opportunities for some savings. The other side that Benjamin commented on is the final ad valorem aggregate assessment will maybe tick up a little bit. But we have the same discussion every year. It's wrong to think that we have always set a millage for trim notice purposes and never gone down. That's just not correct. We have when the budget permits it, because the purpose of setting millage is to pay for the services and policies and CIP that we decide are important. This presentation was really singular. I'm sure that Mayor Davey agrees. We've been trying for a long time to get the budget workshop to be policy-oriented and strategic, as opposed to a preview of a line item presentation that's necessarily half-baked because it's so premature. This was great. This was just great. This is really thoughtful, anticipatory, strategic, and it touches on a whole lot of things that are investments for the future. I'm inclined to either accept Mayor Davey's suggestion or suggest the manager's recommended cap for trim purposes. Let them do the work that they've got to do over the summer. We come back in September and we see where it hits. But the principle that we always observe, which is the fundamental bedrock truth of this exercise, is you can go down, but you can't go up.
Correct.
So it's senseless to shackle the administration that has come up with the strategic vision for how to invest in the future and how to improve on services, and then shackle them. That doesn't make any sense.
Councilmember Laredo, you're recognized.
No, I recognize that, we're not going to spin the story or anybody about voting this way or that, or you're trying to increase taxes. So, but there is a value I have the management philosophy that served me well, of some sort of discipline. I think Ed is struggling to make it a discipline. There are extraordinary items on the income side by the fact that we have all these non-recurring things happen in terms of federal funds. And I been prepared for me and all of us, which is to me the Bible, which is the 10-year growth on our budget, which is when I first got here, we talked about it from $25 million in 2000 to 11 to last year was 35.6. So that's fairly big growth without any tangible difference either in great acquisitions of land or anything that is in the eye of the taxpayer. They're justifiable. So that perception, which is so important in public life, is why are we growing? And I struggled the first 2 years to try to bring down the growth of the. I, on the other hand, for the first time, feel comfortable with the work of Ben and the manager, where if I had to make an exception as to their recommended would be today. I couldn't do it with previous administrations. But I don't know. And, I would have no problem supporting, even though it goes against everything the manager. We can on one hand say you're doing a great job. This is, which I believe it is in terms of the detail, quote, preliminary detail, and say, by the way, we're going to limit you. I think 3.5 is way too high, but his suggestion of 3.3, if you round it off, is something that would send, I think, the right signal and would probably, which we would then strive to bring it down. But I think, Ed, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you want to use this as a discipline as well. And I agree with you 100%. So
I agree. That's correct.
Yeah. And I think that has a lot of value, but I just, we have to say, as you know, in business and every place, there's a point where you have to do the leap of faith. And you've been burned so many times that I think that you have very little leap of faith left. But I have a feeling that that this is the first year since I've been here, and you guys have been around a long time, that I feel comfortable that I can go with the manager's recommendation.
So we don't need a vote.
Well, Councilmember McCormick, and I didn't know if Councilmember Moss wanted to say something before we.
In the effort of trying to not run the meeting so long, I'll try to not repeat too much of what other people said, but I would also be inclined to support the manager's recommendation, given the fact that I think that the feeling of this council is clear, that we would prefer to not go up if at all possible. But we hired a professional manager. We asked you to do a job. We asked you to figure out what you wanted to do and then tell us what it was going to cost. You've done that. In this presentation, which I would agree, I think was excellent and very clear and exactly what should happen at this meeting. We've heard Benjamin say several times that he budgeted very conservatively. So I imagine that moving this number down is actually not going to be that difficult. But seeing what you've done tonight, I also do not want to tie your hands and say you can't do what you've set out to do. And I think Councilmember Laredo mentioned earlier that this seemed very honest, that you gave an honest overview of what you want to do, what you think you can do, and what you think it's going to cost. And in that same spirit of honesty, I'm going to tell you, I would love to see this number come down, but I will support your recommendation as it is here.
Councilmember Moss.
Thank you. I was trying to unmute before, but I couldn't. But I think Councilmember Laredo made a comment that when I said expectations for next year, I was meaning only specifically to the budget, because it was put together so quickly and so well that my expectations are going to be higher. So I just want to clarify that, not the items that are on there. Based on the cap, it's really not important to me. I think that I agree with setting it. I do agree with setting it higher. The only thing I don't agree with is Councilmember London is setting it lower to use this as a way to force you to put something within a certain budget. I think that if that's what we want, we just need to tell you that's what we want, and you'll do it. I mean, that's it. We don't need to use this mechanism to force you to do it that way. So to me, it's not important if it's at 4, if it's at 3.5, it's at 3.3267, which is what you're recommending. I would definitely not support anything underneath what you recommended on that. So it gives you room to work. And if us as a board want to go lower, we just tell him that's what we want to go, and he will make it happen. Because I believe, and based on this presentation that you did, this is professional. This is the best that I've seen sitting up here by far. And, I think that we need to support it. And if something else that we want, we just tell him that's what we want. And I believe he can do it.
Michael?
Thank you.
Yes, Al, Ed.
Basically, as I said before, it's a great presentation. But I also realized the only thing that we as council have in seeing what happens in this village is by setting the budget. And the way we set the budget also makes for, in other words, set it higher, you have a lot of waste and fat and of all kinds of expenditures you don't know about. Setting it too low, you won't be able to provide the goods and services that the people expect. We all want the best high quality services. But to have an efficient government, to have some, this is the only control we have. But I think Luis said financial discipline. I didn't say lower it. Do I believe he can lower it below his last year? Of course I do. But I'm just saying this is our only chance, our only way of saying, hey, we want to be efficient. We meet our strategic sessions. We say, oh, yeah, we want to be efficient. Then we agree to all kinds of expenditures. So I'm saying we can become efficient by setting this at the way it was, and Steve will not have to cut anything out. He will be able to achieve everything he wants to do at this number or lower because he hasn't gone through all the fat that exists today at existing government operations.
But this is not our last chance to cut the millage, Ed.
Yeah, and believe me, it won't go down once it's
gone down a few times while I was on council. So
me too.
Yeah. So
me too.
All right. Do we have consensus at 3.3267? I think we've got 5 people who would agree to lead the trim notice at 3.3267.
Yes.
Okay. Was I correct? I know Ed's not, and I believe Councilmember Segarola is not, but I believe, okay, the rest of us are. So, Mr. Manager, that is, so thank you for this evening.
Can I ask him a quick question?
Certainly.
I'm sorry, it's trivial but important because I'm particularly in these times in the village. I'd like to see clear English, and that I struggle with the attorney about the naming of these meetings, workshop. The September meetings are entitled hearings.
Well,
within a litigious society and all the stuff that we know, hearing sounds like not. It's a regular meeting with the budget as the item. I know it's semantics, but semantics are important.
Well,
someone can come? I just think it should be a council meeting. Period.
Well, is there a statutory requirement that we hold two hearings? I think that's what it is. But if not, I mean, I'm not really that. If it's a semantics issue. But
no, I mean, you have to have 2 hearings. I think it's
right. I think that's what identifies them.
Because you also, there's a procedure that the first item on that you have to take is the millage, then the budget. And some cities do collapse the budget hearing within a regular council meeting, but it's very rare to do that because you kind of have to recess the regular meeting and go to the budget hearing. So that's why it's.
I sometimes don't understand your answer.
So your point, his point is that we have to hold hearings. We have to hold specific hearings.
So you want to call it a hearing?
So I think that's all we do on those evenings.
Look, I think you could call it a budget meeting if you want.
That's what I was going to.
But then you have to have a hearing within the meeting in which you, right?
It's a budget meeting where there's going to be a public hearing. I mean, you could do that. It's semantics. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people understand it. I mean, we've been using it for so many years that way. I think everybody recognizes it.
I agree.
Only specifically for that.
I think it's clearer to have it as a hearing. I would.
Okay.
All right. But again, Mr. Manager, staff, I want to thank you all. This was great. I mean, we're out of here at 8:56, so Ed and I can go yell at each other about how he wants to destroy the village and I want to destroy the village the other way. This is awesome. So,
thank you, guys.
you all.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, Mikey.
Good night, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor.
Good night.